18 years San Francisco Police Department, working for the federal court, and hell, half the department's leaving today. I say that dramatically, but they're losing police officers unbelievably high over the last 5 years of retirements. And I still get their union newspaper and I read all the stuff, and it's us against them, and we don't need that. Yeah, I hope. I'm very emotional about this.
Well, Nat comes from a long line of Calvary Baptist folks that they fought all the way into their 90s. They were taken off the battlefield. They didn't never stop fighting. So Nat comes from good stock over at Calvary Baptist.
By the way, Daryl, there's no
Lattimore,
there's no people of faith on these committees. What's going on?
Well, I think they want me to be the spiritual leader.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Make sure you hold your Bible up straight up, not upside down.
All right. Well, I just heard from City TV. They're having technical difficulties. So I will record this meeting and then it will be posted afterwards.
Thank you.
So that we can start. I know we have a lot to cover and not a lot of time. There we go. So with that, I think I'm going to just hand the microphone over to the chief to get us started.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and it's good to see all of you. I know it's challenging in the COVID-19 times to still make meaningful connections, and we're all getting used to this online forum, but we're very pleased to be with you this evening. And tonight you have from the Santa Monica Police Department, myself. I'm Cynthia Renaud, I'm your Chief of Police. And we also have Captain Derek Jacob, who is over our Patrol Operations Division, Captain Saul Rodriguez over our Special Operations Division, Captain Candice Cobruvius over our Field Services Division.
Hi, everybody.
Captain Thomas McLaughlin with Criminal Investigations Division. And we have two very special guests, Dad's Phone, otherwise known as Detective Roy Brown, and Anna Hara, who works in our Juvenile diversion program and does a lot with our parent project and just so much youth and community engagement. So for me tonight, I'll start off by saying that we have three goals this evening. We're going to couch those in talking about the Santa Monica Police Department, talking about what we value, the philosophies that inform our culture, and our commitment to this community. Second, we're going to look to answer your questions as best we can and give you the details and information that you need to further inform the work of this committee as you move forward. We propose that we structure the conversation tonight by talking about three of your subcommittee topics. First, our community engagement efforts globally, and then we also want to move into a specific discussion about our youth engagement efforts. Second, police culture and training. And third, the budget. Now, we can easily stop after each topic for questions and comments, or during each topic for questions and comments. We'll try to speak slowly to leave some room for any of you to raise a hand or ask a question as we talk. And then after that, we can have some time dedicated to questions and other topics that you might want to talk with us about. That is a lot to accomplish in a very short amount of time tonight. So what I would say is, as one small ground rule is, please think of this as not the conversation, but just the first conversation, with many more to follow. I'd like to start off with a little context about the Santa Monica Police Department. So our department is comprised of just under 450 employees. Of those 450 employees, 52% are sworn police officers, 48% are non-sworn professional staff. This is a very progressive model for a law enforcement agency. It's one of the leanest I've seen in my experience. And many of our non-sworn professional staff employees interface with the public and provide for safety here in our community. Now I'm going to take a moment and share my screen with you so we can have a couple of visuals moving forward. Okay, so the Santa Monica Police Department is comprised of sworn police officers and also public safety officers. Now I'm sure that you've seen public safety officers here in town. They provide a presence in our parks, our downtown area, and our airport. Our community services officers take a majority of our crime reports, and they also handle some of our complex traffic collision reports as well. Our forensics unit processes crime scenes. Our evidence team ensures chain of custody for all evidence, and our records technicians process our reports. Traffic services staff are responsible for parking violations and general traffic flow, and our pier and harbor guards ensure water safety and overall pier safety. Custody officers run our booking and holding facility, and our animal control services team provides for the city's animal care shelter, and they respond to all animal-related calls from residents. So as you can see, just in this brief overview, our police department relies heavily on non-sworn positions to deliver services to the community. I'd like to open first with the topic of community engagement, which goes much deeper than just the things we do. Many of our employees grew up here in Santa Monica. Some have been here since they were police explorers at age 14. Some got hired as cadets at a young age. Many of them live in the city, and some of them have lived in the city their entire lives. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'd like to put up on the screen and actually read the COPS office definition of community policing. So community policing, as stated, is a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies that support the systemic use of partnerships and problem-solving techniques to proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues, such as crime, social disorder, and the fear of crime. But after 29 years in this profession, I've learned that community engagement and community policing is not something you do, it's something that you believe. Here it infuses every part of how we serve our community. While we have programs in Santa Monica engaged towards community engagement, which I'll talk about, we use these programs to inform the culture of this organization. And that culture is one that prides itself on meaningful individual accessibility and engagement. So some of our key organizational strategies that support our community policing philosophy that we currently have in place is our Coffee with a Cop program. Coffee with a Cop is an opportunity for people to get together in an open and inviting environment and just talk, get to know each other. Maybe talk about specific issues they need the police department to handle, or maybe just have a cup of coffee and establish a relationship. Our Community Police Academy is a flagship program, very well known. It's a 10-week commitment where people who live and work in our community come and spend one evening a week with us to learn about our police department and what we do. And in return, we get to learn about them. At the end of these 10 weeks, the class forms lasting relationships with each other and with us. Now, we also have a Spanish Police Academy, and it's the same format as the English-speaking Community Police Academy, but it's offered in the Spanish language in order to expand our reach in the community and ensure that language barriers don't become relationship barriers. National Night Out is a program that probably most of you are familiar with and have attended here in the city in the past. It's a nationwide event, one night in August, and it's when we tempt our citizens with food and fun and activities and stations of our personnel and equipment to have them come spend an evening with us and introduce them more to other facets of the police department that they might not see all the time, like our canine officers or our mounted patrol, or what our crime scene investigators do. This program focuses usually on a theme each year, and it's really a great way to find the humanistic commonalities among all of us. Now, our community affairs team is pretty awesome, and it consists of both crime prevention coordinators and neighborhood resource officers. And the crime prevention coordinator and the neighborhood resource officer partner together, and each one is assigned along with similarly to a police beat in the city. That way they can help the police officers who work that beat conduct some long-term problem solving, and they become a staple of that beat where residents and business owners there can communicate with that neighborhood resource officer, that crime prevention coordinator, about issues, long-term, short-term, quality of life, crimes that they're seeing, and just have that face and that person and that personal touch specific to their area of the city. Our crime prevention coordinators, they offer security surveys and advise along the lines of CETTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. Now, some of our more recognizable community engagement work involves partnerships in and with the following: Movies in the Park, La Posada, the Literary Fair, the Ethiopian Festival, Montana Avenue Walk, Mini Fall Festival at Virginia Avenue Park, the Downtown Holiday Substation Juneteenth Festival, Greens Festival, Meet Me Under the Fig Tree, and the Buy Local event. And along with community engagement, we believe strongly in youth engagement because they are our future. And connecting with our youth early and often is how we build our next best generation. Before we move into a discussion of the key youth programs, I want to take a moment and ask if there are any questions or comments around some of our current community engagement practices.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned these security surveys. How often are they disseminated?
So for the security surveys, our residents can call into our community affairs office and they'll speak with their crime prevention coordinator, who will schedule a time to come out and meet with them and review their home or business, and along the principles of crime prevention through environmental design, offer some tips, tools, and techniques that people can do to keep their homes and their properties safer.
So the community has to lead the charge on that then?
Yes, correct. They would have to request it.
Chief, Mike Schotten here. I had a question. I was just looking at the proposed budget, and I know the police budget has stayed pretty much stagnant. And so in reading through that, it looks like two of the full-page community events that you touted just now, National Night Out and Coffee with a Cop, have both been cut for the coming year. Is that true?
So the Coffee with a Cop program, we're looking at doing virtually. With COVID-19, we think that we can make a good effort there. The National Night Out program, there was a certain monetary amount expended towards it, and we did have to reduce that monetary amount, but that doesn't mean that leading into next August, we won't find a creative way to still meet with the community. Our past National Nights Out have been very robust, and they've cost money. We can still create and host an event without having the money that goes along with it. It won't be as fancy, but it will still be a connection.
Go ahead, Angela. So I wanted to circle back to, you mentioned, you know, some of the sworn officers that actually grew up here and, you know, were born here and all of that. What is the number that are actually living here in Santa Monica right now? Do you have that number?
I don't have that number, no. The way that we collect personnel data, that wouldn't be it's not a computer system that I can query to find out. We would have to do a hand count. The captains and I were actually talking about that recently as we prepared for this meeting. And Nat Travis and I have talked about that before as well, about really solidifying what that looks like in a number.
Julie and then Nat.
You talked about neighborhood resource officers. How many are there? And I'm curious if the folks on the police force feel like there are enough, or if like increasing the number of those types of positions would be a way to increase like the feeling of public safety.
Yeah, our neighborhood resource officers are just fantastic. And in fact, I just got an email today from a resident in the city that I connected him with one of our NROs for an issue. And he emailed me back to talk about, spoke with Officer Tovar. She called me. We had a great conversation. Thank you for connecting us. And it goes on and on like that with feedback from our community members and our both residents and businesses that have the opportunity to connect with these neighborhood resource officers. They're a wonderful asset. And of course, you know, we have to broker our staffing levels. Our primary responsibility here in our core service is to respond to calls for service. When a citizen picks up a phone and calls 911 or calls the police department, for a police officer response, we need to have enough staffing to respond to those calls. And so we are always balancing where we would like to put officers into positions that are not patrol call for service positions. If I had a magic wand and more officers, we would certainly add to our neighborhood resource officer cadre into that team. The work they do is impressive and invaluable.
My question is simple. This morning's Times, you all saw it. That's the reason I asked about the people appearing in front of the station. If I'm at the department and I see that published in the Los Angeles Times, it makes me look like I'm the terrible police department of the county or the area. What kind of response is the city or the police department going to do with respect to that presentation, which as a retiree of the department embarrasses me?
Do you mean within the organization, Nat? Or?
No, I'm talking about that said Santa Monica Police Department, and it went on back. You got all the X's, and everybody else is doing what they're supposed to do. And I'm curious about how you would respond to that, because I know what you're doing. You're presenting to the folks now, which is I've been asking for a long time. I even asked for something, and Lisa, I'm sorry. I asked for the civil liability payouts for the last 10 years by the police department for use of force. I still haven't gotten it. That to me would have bona fide the department's good, what they're doing well. Because I think I saw somewhere in the statistics where that figure had gone down considerably.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I get that kind of information? I'm trying to fight a war here that we got a lot of people. I've been listening to them and reading the stuff. They're very upset with our police department.
Yes. The sentiments and feelings right now are, as you just framed it, Nat, prevalent in this community. And to the extent that the police department, through all ranks, which includes our neighborhood resource officers who attend community meetings regularly, to the extent that we can listen to that and have a conversation and a dialogue about what this police department does and how we do it, then we can talk about that narrative, one community group, one person at a time. Obviously, everyone has the right to their opinion,
of course,
to publish it in both in social media and mainstream media. And it's through connections like this and time that we spend with you and talking about those issues that hopefully not only we can talk through them and work them out, but also talk about any improvements or changes that we can make to further that process and make us better as a police department and better at serving our community.
I know I saw Angela and then Robbie and then Rasika and then Rolinda, and it's 6:55. I'm not one to ever preempt the chief of police, but let's make sure that we also get to hear from, I think we have 4 more speakers. Yes. So let's go in order and then we'll go on.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of follow up and piggyback on what Nat was saying, but also when we look at the community affairs team, have they in the past had any type of restorative justice forums or courageous conversations? I mean, we know that it's needed now, but in the past, when there were other incidences that occurred, did that happen? Do you have any data or information on that?
I don't have data or information on that, so can I pin that question so I can look into that and get back to you with facts? I don't just want to speak off the cuff on that. Okay.
So I guess my question kind of ties into what Angela was saying. I was thinking that she was actually getting ready to ask my question verbatim. But Chief, so as we know, there have been officers who have, there has been, complaints. When you get that in a community, especially with your resource officers, particularly with community, what happens, or what, let me just say it this way, what have you put in place now that would satisfy the community or comfort the community in regards to putting officers in their community that they're not necessarily comfortable with or happy with?
So I think, Robbie, moving forward on that topic, as we've been having that conversation for the past few months, I would say moving forward, as we look at who we select for our neighborhood resource officers, we do a lot of work at not only why they want the position, but also some of their past community engagement and community ties. So our most recent neighborhood resource officer is one who grew up in the city, and in fact, on the outside of his cubicle, he's got his picture posted of his high school football picture from Samo High. And so we do look for those officers for those specific positions that have ties and investment into the community and that have done past community work.
Okay. Have you considered any restorative justice for communities who have, for neighborhoods that have had that problem?
Yeah, so restorative justice in the true definition of it is something that I think we should talk more about at a later date. And only because we only have a certain amount of time tonight. That is an extremely detailed set of procedures for how to work through that. And I think that's something that we should have a conversation about separate from this meeting, about how to accomplish what restorative justice does accomplish and what the best path forward is to that. Robbie, you and I have spoken also about getting the community involved in the police department and meeting officers. So one thing that you'll hear about tonight from other captains when they begin to talk is the police department's model with, just over 50% of police officers. The way we staff, we come to work and we are responsive, as I said, to calls for service. We don't schedule our own workload. And so we're responsive to whatever comes in from dispatch, from the radio, or from citizens. We don't know what that's going to be. And it makes it really difficult for us to say, on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, these patrol officers can be exempted from calls for service for 2 hours to meet with this community group and introduce themselves. But we do have an opportunity, especially when we get into the discussion about police culture and training. When our new officers get hired and come to the organization, they go through an orientation period of 2 to 3 weeks. And what Robbie and I had talked about is having time in that 2 to 3 week orientation period where key community members come in and meet the newly hired officers, talk about their experience, the shared experience going back decades, and how they want to interact with the peace officers who are going to be serving them. We were talking about setting that up, and COVID-19 struck, and in person has been difficult. So Robbie, you and I and others need to pick back up that thread. And when we can start doing some in-person work as we get new officers hired in, we need to build that piece in the new officer hire orientation session.
And then I saw Rasika and Rolinda. And I do see you, Daryl, but I do want to make sure that we move on to the next presentation. So go ahead, Rolinda.
Okay, my question is, what systems are in place at a dispatch level to determine whether or not it should be a community resource officer or an armed officer? And in your view, are those systems optimized?
So I think there's a great opportunity, Belinda, to have that as a separate conversation. The dispatch center actually does not report to the police department. They're part of the Office of Emergency Management. So I would need to get a different section outside of the police department to talk about that. But I think the conversation should include the police department and the fire department as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll pin that. Yeah. So what is in your view, what is the difference in experience in terms of the client or the community experience with the community resource officer versus an armed officer?
Oh, okay. I hope I haven't misled anybody. So the neighborhood resource officer is a police officer. The crime prevention coordinator is a professional staff position.
Okay.
So, but to answer that question, if I still may, I think because of the relationships that the neighborhood resource officers wear a different uniform than we wear. They're in a polo shirt. They have a softer appearance to them from the outset. They meet people for coffee. They meet with security directors from business companies. They go out to people's homes to participate in security surveys with them. And because it's a face to a name to a person in the police department, I think there is a bit of a different relationship there for the neighborhood resource officers when they're out and about doing their job. And that boils down to not the fact if they're police officers or not, but how that relationship is built and fostered in the first name basis and the connection. It is that same neighborhood resource officer who goes out on the same community groups, and it's that consistency in human being responding to a call from the community that establishes that connection and creates that sense of ease and working relationship and non-fear and non-stress in the residents who are dealing with them.
Oh, okay. And if I just may have one last tag, what do you know, like the median salary difference between that and the armed officer?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Rasika?
I just wanted to circle back to Shuli's question. I know we're all talking about neighborhood resource officers, but I don't think I heard the actual number of how many SMPT has. So how many neighborhood resource officers do we actually have?
We have 4.
Okay, thank you.
And then Daryl, did you still want to ask a quick question, or should we move on to our next presenter? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh,
There you go.
what I was going to say is that when I saw that report card, I just found it interesting that we were ahead of LAPD and they're getting ready to fund NACP and all these other groups for all the transgressions they've done. I just didn't know how they got a better, I'd like to know more about who sent that report card out. And then the security survey, initially, you can check with retired Captain Shirley. I think he was a lieutenant at the time. When they first started that, he and I and several officers going out to different church organizations and they were discussing security. And I think it evolved into, once that was satisfied, to people requesting it. They may want to go back to it, but I think that's how it evolved. And it went away from just the community meetings, just an anecdotal. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna do it. We're gonna move on to the next presenter.
All right, so next up is Captain Thomas McLaughlin to talk about some of our key youth programs.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, so before I begin, I want to thank all of you for all of the very important work you're doing in this topic and for all the work you're doing in our community. I believe bios were handed out to you about who we are and what we're about, but very quickly, I've been here 19 years. I'm a captain, as the chief said, over our criminal investigations division. And before working with the Santa Monica Police Department, I worked for the Orange County Probation Department, where I worked with youth in alternative education settings. And before that, my very first job was with the city of La Palma, where I worked in their Parks and Recreation Department as a recreation coordinator responsible for running youth programs. So although I'm responsible for some of our youth engagement programs now, I have some history there as well. So our youth engagement programs are located in our criminal investigations division, specifically within our youth services unit. I believe these programs go to the heart of community policing, of restorative justice, which was touched on earlier, and of building trust in our community. Like Nat said earlier before we started the meeting, he wants to win, period, together, as do we here in the police department. And I believe these programs go to that, go to winning together with our community. So first, I wanted to talk is our school resource officer program. We have 2 officers dedicated to that program, Officer Russ Grimmond and Officer Ben Jenkins. Those school resource officers, they're not housed at any one school. They're not disciplinarians, but they're partners with the school district and the private schools in our community. Our SROs are responsible for a number of things, including investigating and conducting follow-up on suspected child abuse incidents, on doing threat assessments at school sites, partnering with our youth and juvenile crimes detectives, and a number of other things. They are quite busy with them just being 2 officers assigned as SROs. As you also see, and as we go through here, our SROs are integrated in many of our youth services and engagement programs, such as with JDP, which is our Juvenile Diversion Program, and Parent Project. And I'd just like to add before I leave our SROs, before the events of May 31st, there was a national discussion taking on life of its own about whether or not SROs should be on school campuses. And while that discussion was happening, I reached out to our school and I spoke to the director of the student services there, and I asked her if she still wanted to have the partnership with our SROs, because really it's a decision made by both of us. We're equally interested in it. And without any hesitation, she spoke for the school district and said she absolutely wanted our SROs involved in their campus activities and their campus life. So that's our SRO program. The next program I'd like to speak briefly about is our Police Activities League officer, or PAL. We have 1 full-time officer assigned to PAL, which is run out of Memorial Park. PAL is a community services program, but we have been longtime partners and understand how important the investment is at PAL. PAL provides educational, cultural, recreational, and outreach programs to our community's youth. It is a unique community organization that we believe fosters trust between youth and the men and women of the Santa Monica Police Department. We believe these relationships formed by our police officers there are lifelong lasting with many of our at-risk youth. And not only do we have the 1 full-time officer assigned there, we recently ended a 2nd officer who was on loan to PAL through the summer months. And then additionally, there are 2 police lieutenants and myself who are involved with PAL and the PAL Board of Directors. So that's our PAL program. Next is DARE, which we all know and remember which was known as the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program. We have 6 officers assigned to the DARE cadre on a collateral basis. DARE over the years has morphed into teaching young people about safe and responsible decision-making and the associated risk and consequences involved with decisions. In this last complete school year, the school year of 1920, we had approximately 600 students graduate from the DARE program at 8 participating schools in our community. Next, our Explore program. We currently have 14 Explorers in our program, which is supervised by 1 police sergeant and 4 police officer advisors. The Explorer program is a national youth program associated with Learning for Life that provides young men and women the opportunity to learn about various careers in law enforcement by offering and showing them experience here in the building and providing them training. The program promotes personal character development, respect for the rule of law, physical fitness, good citizenship, and patriotism. Our program gives the police department the opportunity to mentor young men and women in a positive and a dynamic environment. The Explorers take part in crime prevention activities, community policing, traffic control, ride-alongs, disaster assistance, civic events, and other administrative duties here in the police department. To be eligible as a police explorer, as a young person, you must be between the ages of 14 and 21 and maintain a grade average of C or higher, be able to meet the physical requirements, and have no criminal record. Upon entering into the program, our police explorers, they attend the South Bay Regional Law Enforcement Academy, which is at El Camino College, and consists of 12 Saturdays, totaling 120 hours of instruction. Our explorers volunteer a great amount of time with community events, ranging from Coast to the LA Marathon to PAL events and other events here in the community. Next program I'd like to speak very briefly about is our police cadets. We currently have 5 police cadets here in the police department, and prior to the fiscal constraints resulting from COVID-19, we had 12. Our cadets work part-time and are paid roughly $17 an hour and must be enrolled in college with at least 12 units and maintain a C average. Our police cadets are exposed to the inner workings of the police department to include records, forensics, logistics, investigations, and administration. They're provided quarterly training in various areas and are mentored by many here in the department. Some of our police cadets have been hired by the Santa Monica Police Department as full-time employees, some by other law enforcement agencies, and others too have gone on to other careers outside of law enforcement. And lastly, the star of the show is our Juvenile Diversion Program and Parent Project. The department recognized early on the importance of the program and has since invested significant time and energy in it. Anna Hara, who's our Youth and Family Services Support Coordinator, and Roy Brown, who's our Youth Services Unit Detective, were instrumental in getting the program off the ground in 2016 and are responsible for where it is today. At the onset, they applied for and were accepted into the Diversion Certification Program at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And as you will see, the program is all about restorative justice and public-private partnerships. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Anna and Roy, and they're going to take it from here. So Anna and Roy, the floor is yours.
Thanks. As you get us set up, I'll just say a quick, I didn't hear about a bio, so I'll just give a little quick bio of myself and say, right, I always like to introduce myself first and foremost as a community member, right? I was born and raised here in the Pico neighborhood and have lived here for the 2 years, except for the 2 years where I was in grad school in DC. So come from that perspective and super excited to share with you about all the great work that we do through these programs. And it's a Prezi, so I hope that this works out just as well as, you know, PowerPoint presentations. Roy, I can't see you. I just want to make sure you're there.
I'm here. I'm not sure what's happening, but I can see you, but I'm here.
Okay, good. Maybe if you slide your phone, I think you'll be able to see the presentation.
I see the presentation.
Okay,
just
cool.
You guys can't see.
That's all right. All right, so yeah, this is just we're gonna tell you a little bit about how our diversion program works. To give you a quick synopsis of how it came to be, I applied for the job because there was a one-liner that said establish a juvenile diversion program. And so I was hired on at the end of September, and by December, we were in Georgetown trying to figure out how to create an evidence-based diversion program for our city and our community. We learned a lot of different things, specifically about what are the pieces that need to go into a diversion program. They weren't selling, this is the model for everybody, but it was more about these are the pieces that need to be included. And then we came back, we created some plans, and then we went out and we talked to over 30 different groups in our community to get some feedback. And this is what we've come up with. So we started right with the mission and vision, so really easy. Our mission's simple. We want to engage young people and their families. We want to link and strengthen them, and we want to improve outcomes. Really, our vision is broad. It's about long-term outcomes that include recidivism, high school graduation rates, because we know that that's the #1 factor that will prevent recidivism once a young person graduates from high school. Research shows, right, that they are much less likely to get in trouble with the law again. And for us, there's the added component of connecting them to agencies in their community. Our diversion program is voluntary, right? We're not a court, so we can't mandate anybody, but it's a voluntary program specifically to divert young people away from arrest, formal court proceedings. It is also a formalized structure to identify and assess young people, their needs, other protective factors, and it provides intervention that includes services when needed.
So officers have the discretion at any point of contact in the field to counsel and release our youth. And what we mean by that is when we have youth that are, stopped for examples would be smoking or drinking or marijuana, those things, those levels to us don't rise to the level of putting someone into the juvenile justice system. So we ask our officers if you can just handle that out in the field, have a conversation with them, maybe talk with the parents, and then release them, because we all know that youth who commit crimes at a young level tend to not reoffend. The numbers show us about 85% of youth never reoffend again. So why are we putting them in the system? So we ask our officers just to counsel and release.
Yeah, and then the other thing to note is just that there's a diversion box that was specifically added to the juvenile citation, so that it wasn't something that came out afterwards, but something that officers can directly refer to out in the field and let parents and young people know immediately. Our criteria, right, actually, can you go back one? Our criteria as it states in our current policy, right, that it's first-time juvenile offenders with any infraction or misdemeanor. So it's any young people that's either cited or arrested in Santa Monica. When we first created this and had a conversation with our prior chief, with Chief Seabrooks, she was very clear about this isn't a Santa Monica specific program, but if there's any crime that's committed in our city, we're responsible for it and we have to answer for it. So we've opened that up, right, for any young person, and have worked with kids that are not just out of the city, but even out of the state. And then felonies and second time offenders are on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. And then it does mean all infractions and all misdemeanors. But we like to, in our education with officers, we like to tell them that eligible does not necessarily mean automatic.
And the reason for that is some of your misdemeanors could be domestic violence, sexual assault cases, child pornography possession cases, gun cases. So we have to really think through those and work through those.
And then the way that it works is our youth services office gets the citation or gets the report. What we do is we then contact the family via phone. We kind of explain what the purpose of the program is, tell them that it's voluntary, tell them kind of what the program holds. And then if they're interested, then we schedule an intake meeting with them. Go one more. And then our intake meeting, right, parent attendance is mandatory. We know, right, that parents have to be on board with all the things that we're doing with young people. And so we require them to be specifically at the first intake meeting. We want them to know exactly what their young people are getting into. We do a pre-assessment, right, and it really assesses what the risk level is. Some of the sample questions from a valid and reliable scientific assessment that we were actually given through the Georgetown class is youth attendance in the last 4 months of school, right? That kind of tells us, are they engaged in school? Are they not? And what's the frequency of drugs or alcohol in the last 3 months? And that specifically for me just allows me to kind of go in a little bit deeper and talk about maybe other kind of risky behaviors that young people might be having that might need some service delivery. We have a baseline for infraction and misdemeanor, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Again, it's voluntary, and then at the intake meeting, the first session with case management is scheduled. So we don't let them leave our office until the first case management session is scheduled. And then in the first case management session, we do a full assessment that's usually about 45 to 60 minutes long. There is, a lot of other assessment questions that are asked, specifically with the compliance with parental rules. We want to know if maybe there's conflict happening at the home where there's a need for, family intervention. The amount of free time youth spends, not just with negatively influencing peers, but I'm much more interested in what they're doing with their free time, right? Are they engaged in something? Are they in a program? Are they interested in something? And if they are, how can we make them do more of the things that they already like to do? And then just the frequency of meeting with young people and case manager really depends on what their individual needs and risks are. So what makes this program different from the other ones that we've kind of researched and talked with different agencies is really the idea of case management, right? It comes from a social and emotional framework. We know that follow-up and kind of having a consistent adult in young people's life is really what the difference is. And for us, research has shown that immediate intervention, right? So not waiting 3 months for them to go before a probation judge, but immediate intervention with a responsible and caring adult is really the most effective way to intervene. Go ahead, Mark.
So the baseline when a youth is arrested in our city for an infraction is 8 hours of community service, 1 class, and then the ISP is their individual service plan. For a misdemeanor, it's 20 hours of community service plus 2 classes, and again, that individual service plan. But keep in mind, that's just the baseline, and that's why we talk about being voluntary, because 3 kids could be arrested for the same crime, but based off of the needs to treat them, to give them a better future, we may offer them more mental health training or tutoring or whatever it may be. So this is just a baseline. And then as far as community service, you know, back in the old days, you know, when I first started 25 years ago, we used to put kids in an orange t-shirt, put them on the freeway, or put them on the beach to clean up. And it was humiliating. It didn't work. And we realized, hey, we were doing this wrong for all these years. So now we've taken a new approach. And now we identify and give the youth an opportunity to explore and develop their personal skills. So what is it that you as a youth want to do? Maybe you're struggling with English and you need tutoring. Maybe you want to be an artist and we just need to connect you with somewhere you need to go. So the community service is completely different than what it was in the past. And we also, you know, we work with this with the parents, with the family, with the guardian to make sure it's something that's in the best interest of this minor instead of the old school way that police thought they knew everything. And we realized we didn't. And then the last thing, you know, the youth unfortunately now are responsible for finding their own community service opportunities. And that's really, you know, keep it blunt, keep it real because of liabilities and things like that. So we have to have the parents sign off and make sure they're comfortable with where their youth goes.
Yeah, and for us, really, right, something to highlight is that partnerships are really vital. We believe in the collective impact model. Actually, this program and this entire idea came out of my many years of work through the Cradle to Career collective and really thinking about how agencies within the specific roles that they play can respond differently to young people and to the behavior that we know is pretty common for young people. I myself, right, you know, I always tell the story, I got caught shoplifting when I was 12 years old. And thankfully for me, the security guard decided to call my mother instead of call the police because there was not a diversion program that existed for me when I was 12 years old, right? And had that, you know, had that decision been different, my life may have turned out very, very different. But they called my mom, which is the right person to call. She shamed me and never spoke again. So that was great. Right. And I think part of it is what we know about young people is that they are going to do things that are just dumb. Like that's part of the adolescent brain, right? Part of it is that you do risky things, that you take risks, that you are part of your development is to be able to do that. Unfortunately for us, some of the young people that we see, that behavior is criminal, right? And so then it's about how do we as a system respond differently as opposed to expect young people and what is their normative behavior to be different. Right. For us, again, studies have shown we need to connect them to a long-term relationship with caring adults. And really for us, it's about how do we be a conduit for young people back into their own community. So here's a little bit of data we do quarterly reports. So based on our last one, which was June 2020, right, it tells us a little bit about the specific crimes that we have diverted. Most of them are property crimes, and that includes things like, you know, we see a lot of like petty theft. People love to steal things from Sephora. And I'm here to tell you Sephora is watching you, so stop doing that. And they also like to, you know, sometimes they have possession of stolen property, things like that. We have crimes against person, and that's really like a schoolyard fire, assault and battery, those types of things. We have a couple of resisting arrest. A good 18%, almost 20% is about substance use. So either possession or of marijuana or alcohol or being intoxicated or high. And then status offenses, most of that is really curfew. So again, we're trying to look at how the system can respond differently. We've had 121 young people referred. So unfortunately, because of the size of our staff and the size of our program, right, we don't have, it's not an open referral process. Young people, unfortunately, do have to commit a crime in order to be referred. Most of the young people that we've seen have been males, 85 to 36 females. You have the age breakdown and you have the racial breakdown. And then so far, we've had 82 graduate. But at the end of this summer, we'll have a couple more. We've been working really hard this summer. And then some of the lessons learned, right? Many youth, 45%, are low risk. So that's kind of in line with what the research shows us, that most young people are very low risk. They're gonna do something stupid. And so really it's about them having that initial accountability, and then they go on to never commit another crime. Again, 17%, so almost 20% of our young people are high risk for reoffense, right? So for me, that means that it's a reflect a real need for intense services. Sometimes that means substance use, sometimes that means individual counseling, sometimes that means kind of like a wraparound system. And one of the kind of organizations or partnerships that are key and vital for us, especially for kids that live in Santa Monica, is the Youth Resource Team, as they are the only organization that does any case management with young people here in the city. And the other partners is the Middle School Support Team, again, the only collective that do case management with high school and middle school kids. Many of our young people are from out of the area, and so they have no real connection to Santa Monica. They came for a weekend, or they came to have a good time, and they ended up having too good of a time. And then for us, you know, officers training has resulted in some small internal cultural changes, and I'll let Roy share a little bit of those examples.
So I can speak for me, so pardon me because I'm not the most articulate person, but I'm very passionate. I might get a little hyped up because I'm passionate about this. For me, is to be brutally honest, is we realized our lessons learned, we were just wrong. We were flat out wrong. When I started 25 years ago, you know, the culture was any young person, especially young people of color, they commit a crime, we arrest them, we put their prints in the system. A little bit later, we put the DNA in the system because we always knew that they would commit another crime. That was our thought. And then as time goes by, we get a little bit wiser, we realize, hey man, that was kind of backwards, right? We were wrong, 100% wrong. And we are starting to learn that, you know, when Anna came in. But even back before that, we were doing some diversion. But again, we were doing the wrong diversion. We didn't have the follow-ups and the treatment and the different things to lead this young person out of the path that they were going down. And so as far as training, yeah, let's keep it real. It's been hard. It's not easy changing the culture that's been for hundreds of years that we're trying to change. But I am proud to say that we have been changing. You know, before, like I said, if we arrested someone, we put them in a system. We had a point where maybe a year ago, we had a pursuit where 3 youths went in pursuit, assault against officers, drove their car towards officers, wanted to run, tried to run over a couple officers. And before I can get out to the scene and we get this case, I have a supervisor calling me and saying, hey, you know what? These are just young kids. They just made a bad choice, man. We don't want to put them in the criminal justice system and arrest them for the spelling evading. What can you guys do to help us? So that culture is changing. Is it completely changed? Are we the greatest police department? Are we doing everything right? Absolutely not. I'd be lying to you. But we are making some significant changes with the help of our administration and giving us just the clearance to do what we have to do to try and help.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of what we're working on, right, is just to continue that training, how to continue those conversations, and how to create opportunities for officers, specifically new officers, to get out of what their regular patrol duties are and specifically have some good time with young people. And I'm looking at the time, and so I don't want to run super over, but the last 2 things I'll say, I'll keep that, you know, thing up so you all can read it. But the last 2 things I want to say is about parent projects. That actually came out of our community conversations around diversion, right? Parents all said, this is great, we love this idea, but what about the parents, right? We have all of these classes and all this training when young people are in elementary school, but we have nothing when they turn into these like crazy teenage monsters. So can you help us? And we had no ideas of anything, and we said, sure. So we went out, we researched, we talked to a lot of different people, and we came back with the curriculum of parent projects, and we've had 8 complete sessions now. It's been going for almost 3 years, and the school district is an official partner of it, as is St. Joseph's and Santa Monica Boys and Girls Club. And we're doing classes in English and Spanish, and we're even doing a youth component kind of that runs parallel with parenting classes. And then long before long before May 31st, we were working on young people and PD dialogues, right? So about 3.5 years ago, we had the good fortune of Dr. Shelton and our previous captain, Wendell Shirley, sat down and said, hey, we want to start working on this. In the midst of a calm time, we know that that's when you need to build relationships. And so a couple of us got together, put together a 3-week curriculum, went to a Samuel High government class, actually of one of my old teachers, and did that the first time. And everybody in all the surveys, officers, young people, teacher, everyone said that's not enough time. So you need to come back with like double the amount of time. So we came back the next year, and we've been doing 6-week programming for the last like 2.5 years, and have done it at both Samo and Olympic High School. Just really having conversations of getting to know one another, doing different activities. icebreakers, we do, traffic stop scenarios and all kinds of stuff. We can talk for a long time about all the different things that we do, but wanted to just give you all just a little taste.
So thank you, Anna. Thank you, Roy. So Lisa, we'll turn it over to you before we give it on to the next captain or captains, if there's any questions from the group.
Oh, there's questions. I see Nat, Mike, Rasika, and Angela.
I wanted to commend you, but I also like to make sure that you're aware of all the negative stuff that's being written. There are people who have written things that said that you should not even be dealing with kids that's on a school campus in uniform. I get back to the initial point. We've got to have an aggressive reporting of what the things you're doing. My question to you, have the courts commended you, or somebody of a higher stature commended your program where you have records of this? Or do you have parents that have come back and says, oh my God, look what you've done for my son or daughter? You're not going to win this battle by doing what you're doing if you don't let somebody know about it.
Now, for me to answer that question is, I think one of the answers is, Captain McLaughlin talked about it, just the conversation he had with the school district about wanting us to come back, because we have changed, right? So that thing you're talking about not having the kids on campus, 100%, I agree with that. Why are we there to deal with disciplinary issues? Why are we there when a kid won't go to lunch? Like, that's not our role. Our role is to be there to develop that community relation, give young people an opportunity. Hey, if something's bothering you, if you're hurt, we're here to help you, not to deal with those issues. And so that's why our people aren't on campus. They're not on campus. We don't respond to, for an example, we don't respond to marijuana calls. Like, that's a school issue. It's crazy as people won't talk about it, but the school is a lot more punitive than we are as a police department, right? So sometimes the kids are like, hey, I want to go to the police department. But to answer your question, no, we don't have that stuff from the parents and publicity wise, but that is something that probably we should be thinking about.
Roy, thank you. And I'll get off the air because I realize there's a clock. But the point you just made, we don't respond to school campus on marijuana calls. Let the world know it. Because I'm telling you, I read tons of stuff. This guy up there named George Brown, he sent a document out before we had our first meeting. I think it was 700 friggin' pages. I consumed that damn thing and read it because I want to do a good job. And I'm looking at you guys tonight, you're making reports, but there's literature, there's stuff in our files that don't want you to do what you're doing. Am I wrong? Did you guys read the same files that I've been reading?
So I don't know that I've read the 700-page document. 400? I have not read the 400-page document.
You told me to say 700 pages.
But
you want me to be seen as an erudite. I'm not. Go ahead.
But I'll say two things. I think we suffer from the same thing of many nonprofits, right? We're too busy doing the work to tell people about the work that we're doing. So that's one. And I think two, part of the discussion, right? We were in discussion actually with the county as they were figuring out what their diversion recommendations are. And they ended up saying that for them, it was important to say that police should have the least amount of presence, right? The least amount of kind of role in a young person's life. And part of my response to that is, but then we miss out, right? We miss out on the ability to give Roy an opportunity to connect with some young people. We miss out on opportunities to actually teach officers how to think about young people and how to think about interacting with young people and adults differently when we completely say, stay out of the room. And so for me, it's about making sure that we identify who those good officers are, how to train them better, and how to give them the ability and the empowerment to be able to do this type of policing as opposed to doing the traditional policing of just go out and fight crime.
Thank you. Rasika said that she's going to skip, so Mike, Angela, and then Shuli.
Yeah, Officer McLaughlin, unlike what Anna and Roy had mentioned, the SROs are they're not a nonprofit. They're funded by the police, and they are on schools. And, if you look at the Southern Poverty Law Center, they did a study and showed that students who go to schools with an SRO are 5 times as likely to be arrested. And so you mentioned it's a large national conversation, and you spoke to the head of student services and that you feel as though that conversation is over. I just want to know if you spoke with any parents, any students upon making the decision to maintain our.
No, I did not. And do I believe the conversation is over? Not at all. It's ongoing, and there may be a point in time where our SROs get removed from campuses. I hope that's not the case, but if that's the decision the community comes to, then I would absolutely respect that. But I think Anna and Roy would speak to how powerful those connections our officers have with youth in our community, but it's not done. I understand that and I recognize that.
Yeah, I just think you'll see community engagement is a big piece of what this committee is after. And, everybody that you just referred to works for the police department. So we would love to get more input from the community and something like that.
Angela?
Hi, yes, I have two questions. They're kind of twofold, so we'll just see how it goes. First of all, Officer McLaughlin, I think it was you that did speak about the DARE program and the 600 graduates from the 8 participating schools. I'm wondering though, what is the success rate for schools such as Lincoln, the middle schools, Lincoln, JAMS, and then also Samo High and Malibu? Like, how many students out of there? Because we know right now we are facing a very high drug situation there at those schools, where I know, last week a student overdosed. So I'm just wondering, and of course school's not in session, but what we're dealing with, right? And so I'm wondering, how does that coincide with that group of youth, the middle school and the high schools? Is their curriculum a little bit different? And then number 2, and I think it kind of folds into the juvenile diversion. Do you guys also do any type of drug intervention? And then for your group as well, Anna and Roy, you mentioned that you had 82 graduates thus far, but I guess I want to know what that really means as far as they've graduated. But then, and I know it's a early program, so we can't really tell. It's only been 2 years, but I just wanted to know that success rate, because then we're looking again at this issue with the drugs and all of that in our youth. So that's what I'm really trying to tackle, is where can we go? How deep do we need to dive to really address the issue in middle school and high school using these 2 platforms, if you will?
So, Ms. Scott, I'll go first. So our DARE programs, we don't conduct any DARE programs in Malibu, although our school district extends into Malibu. We only teach here in Santa Monica schools. And we're not in the middle school or high schools. It's just in the elementary schools. DARE does have a junior high school program, and DARE does have a high school program, but we only participate in the DARE elementary school program. So, and then lastly, have we, the police department, done any follow-up studies 2 years later, 4 years later, 8 years later, to see if the graduates of the DARE program that we've sponsored and initiated and done have been involved in drug use or other unlawful or illegal behavior? We have not yet done that.
And I'm sorry, let me just ask you one more question. So have you also even spoken with the middle schools and the high schools to see if they have a need or desire, because they know that this is an issue?
Yeah.
I could talk a little bit about that too.
Me too.
Anna, did you say you wanted to go?
Yeah, so I was going to say, actually, a couple of years ago, when we had actually, it was a couple of school resource officers that brought back, right, DARE. It had kind of, DARE was, Officer Joe back when I was a kid, him and his parrot. And then now, right, it's a much, it's like a kind of robust curriculum. So when they restarted the DARE program, they started with a couple of key elementary schools and then really focused in on the middle schools. And so then we were both at Lincoln and at John Adams, I want to say, for the first 2 years that I was here. So that would be 2015 and 16. And then there just wasn't enough DARE officers, right? those kind of promoted and became sergeants or got on other collateral assignments, and so then they weren't able to kind of continue to be DARE officers. We're going back to the cohort style, and I think have a bit of a robust one, and so we will be approaching the middle schools probably next year, because the remote learning thing makes things a little bit difficult this year, but that is on the plan for the DARE program. And then I would add for us specifically in juvenile diversion, what we do is we have one specific class that every young person has to take. It's them and their parents has to come, and it's called a laws and consequences class. And basically what we do is we have a discussion about what are the top 10 crimes that young people get caught doing, right? And then we kind of have a series of conversations about why there are laws, what that means to safety, and really with like YouTube videos and a couple of different things, try to create discussions with young people and their parents specifically, because that's one thing that we have found, that many parents don't know how to have a conversation with their young person about drugs. And so, hey, let's start it here, you all go home, and then we obviously give them resources to many of the organizations that are in our city, right, that have those conversations. And then with Parent Project, part of our youth program, what we do is the night that parents are talking about drugs and how to have that conversation, we have Claire come in and they do a presentation to young people specifically around vaping. It's kind of like the first thing, because that's kind of the highest thing that we see happening at both the middle schools and the high schools. Oh, and real quick, your recidivism question. Yeah, so for the 82, basically what we do is we wait a year and then kind of check back in with them and find out. And so far of the 82 that have graduated, 4 have reoffended. So we have like a 5% recidivism rate.
Thank you. Shuli, Liz, and then Robbie.
Rasika, were you before me? No? Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit about like the school district perspective and a little bit of a mental health perspective on the SRO issue. I work for the Student Services Department, full disclosure. I have, personally some mixed feelings about SROs on our campuses. They're not on our campuses, like they're called to our campuses when we need them. Or is it always the right call? Maybe not. Do they help in really scary safety situations where kids are suicidal or threatening the school? Yes. I think that we do need them for certain situations. We unfortunately don't have a perfect mental health county system where we can just call PMRT and they get there to assess the suicidal student quickly enough. So often our SROs are our backup for that. And that's a really important needed service for youth. Depression and suicidality are not much, but they are higher in Santa Monica than other areas. So this is a real issue and we lose kids to suicide. And so the SROs are useful in some respects. And also for our attendance process, sometimes they can really come in handy and like get kids to come to school when they are not coming to school in other ways. Is it, again, always the right, intervention for every family? Not necessarily, but sometimes we do need them. I just want to say, like somebody had asked, is there like parent or student support for the diversion program out there? I don't know, but I can tell you from my 15 years working in the school district, working on and off at Samo High. I would say since the diversion program has come into play, I've seen a much better relationship between youth in our community and our police department. Anna and Roy, they do great work with youth. The Parent Project is amazing. I could find some anecdotal like stories for you of parents that do really appreciate this work and learn a lot from it. So I'm a believer in relationships and restorative justice and healing. And that's where this is happening in our city, is with our diversion program. In our schools too, but it is happening. And so that's a model I would say we should replicate and put more funding into, to have more Annas in our community. It would be great. So as far as DARE and the schools, I don't know how like well researched the newer model, the curriculum of DARE is. I believe I did read in the past that it wasn't very effective in prevention of drug use for kids. The new model may come out with better evidence, but we do have a huge issue in our community around substance use. And we have lots of services in place and lots of prevention going on, lots of education of kids and of parents, and partnerships with Claire Foundation and treatment agencies, and we still have a huge issue on our hands. I don't know if that's a police department matter or a completely separate conversation, but that's just my like kind of 2 cents on a couple of those recent topics, just from where I sit with mental health, substance use, kids in our community, relationships with police. I think I would like to see more of like those like relationship building between all of our community members and our officers. That's each other, we can talk in a more understanding and respectful, productive way. So more of that.
Thanks, Julie. Liz?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to piggyback on what Shuli shared, also as a mental health provider, not only in the nonprofit world, but also through my prior practice. I can truly tell you that JDP has really done amazing work, and specifically through Parent Project, as I'm one of the Spanish facilitators for parents. We also offer it simultaneously in English, and parents have really taken well to it. And just like Shuli said and Anna shared, the relationship between parents and youth and police and the school district, I just feel like has evolved. And again, the expansion and investing in something like that model is really, in my opinion, really fruitful and preventative. I also feel like, as Shula was sharing, in terms of building relationships and collaboration, is really expanding that collaboration, because one of the things that I think Captain McLaughlin shared earlier is about, or I forgot who it was, but the SROs, the neighborhood resource officers, the NROs, is also getting to know the community mental health agencies, the service providers. I feel like there's not enough relationships, like who they are, what they do, and just consult. And again, for preventative measures, I haven't necessarily seen that with our neighborhood resource officers. And so again, to do this work, it has to be collaborative. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I just feel like there should be intentional effort and engagement with I know some of them do attend the YRT MSST meetings, but there's, again, making that extension or invitation to get to know our agencies more intimately, if you will, because I think that'll also help. The other piece that I wanted to ask a question about was for the youth, for people who work in the youth department, or I'm not sure exactly what it is. How much training do officers or people in the youth division, if you will, get training in terms of youth development, child development, brain development, when they're doing this work, and also including the SROs? How much training is involved in that?
Roy, can you comment on that? New officers coming in, the orientation they have in the youth services unit, at least with you guys, and then any other training they may get along the way.
So Anna and I get majority of the training, and then we kind of impart that training. To answer your question, not enough, to be truthful and to be transparent, not enough. We need more, so people really understand that adolescent behavior and why youth do what they do when confronted by a position of authority, and how to handle that. So, I mean, all I can say is we need more, but we do get training. But again, as I believe the chief mentioned it earlier, sometimes it's hard when you got to put someone in patrol and they got a job to do, and then we have to balance resources with time, with training. It's hard because we're wearing a lot of hats. So to answer your question, Liz, we need more, and we need more community support on it as well.
And I'll be even more honest, because I tend to be just like, as they say in Spanish, no tengo pelos en la lengua, right? So I think we don't, right? There's no specific thing that anyone that comes into the youth services unit has to go through. I know that there's like school resource officer training that some of our school resource officers have gone to. I know that Roy and I have kind of pieced together restorative justice here or diversion there, but there's not like a full kind of academy or kind of series of trainings that officers have to go through. We're working on that. We have a diversion cadre of 12 officers that have self-identified as wanting to work with young people. And so that is part of the training process that we are going to bring them along, but that doesn't exist yet.
So I think that would be helpful for our committee, I think, as we think about the investment of monies, of ensuring that there is money and intentional training specifically for our youth, especially if we see JDP expanding and growing in other areas and being collaborative, is to ensuring that our officers are also knowledgeable and know the population, and even through a trauma-informed lens as well, to ensure that, again, we're doing our due diligence as you guys have evolved the JDP program to where it's at now and have had, a great success rate. But it's important for also to have all of those specific trainings to really be even that more impactful.
Liz. Robbie?
Hi, yeah, congratulations on the work that you're doing. I wanted to ask, what is maybe I missed it because I had to take a bathroom break. What are the demographics of breakdown, like ethnic, gender? Do you have that? Or did I miss it in the presentation?
I think you missed it, Robbie.
Somebody?
Maybe for Anna.
I missed it? Okay, I'll go back. I'll go back and look at it.
I'm definitely over here talking as if I was not on mute. Sorry about that. Yeah, so let me, I'm happy to pull that up right now.
No, you don't have to pull it back up. I can go.
Okay.
I didn't see it either.
Oh, okay. Okay, well then pull it back up, Anna.
Okay. I can tell you what it is because I'm not the one that's in charge of the slideshow. So I can read them from my notes.
Okay.
85 males and 36 girls. I remember.
Yes. Yeah, and our racial demographics are 36 white, 19 black, 54 Latino, 6 Asian, 2 other, 2 mixed, and 2 Native American.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sorry.
Any other questions for these two superstars? I see two.
I have one for Liz real quick. Where's Liz?
You have one for Liz?
No, Liz just made a statement. I want to back her up. I think, and again, this goes back to the the literature that we're getting about the problem. We could have a certification program, meaning set the curriculum required, as Liz was suggesting, have your program certified. What I've been screaming about, if we work this thing out and do it right, I could get in touch with Post, the former chairman of Post Commission, and say, here's your model for medium cities like Santa Monica. So if you had this program and you had X number of, Liz was pushing it, and I totally agree with it. Have a total amount of units of training that's required to be in that outfit to help these kids. Then that I think that would go to the people on our committee who are demanding more and demanding more accountability. Does that make any sense? A certification to brag about it. A police officer wants to go up the ladder, right? And then they're working in this unit and I've got my certificate that says I'm this in that group, and that gives them something to put in when they try to go up to the next ladder. When I tried to go up the ladder, they called me a troublemaker when I came out third on the written and the lieutenant's exam and got a 65 on the oral. So I understand what we're talking about. Go ahead.
Errol?
Oh, just I'm glad to see that Anna's bringing so much back to the community. We needed it about 20 years ago when the Unified School District and Police Department were showing up our children. A parent named Belinda Roma sometimes several children because they insisted to go to the school district and the police department in their efforts to have resource officers. I think Jim Butts was chief then. And so it took a lot, and the white parents were weaponizing those officers against Black and brown parents. So I'm not sure, they're a lot younger than I am. They know, but I don't know if they remember, but those are real challenges. I'm glad to see the officers saying they've learned, because the police department used to use the intimidation of the Black and brown children, especially the middle school, because they knew their family members were already in trouble. And so we went to butts to stop that. So I'm glad that there is some movement in terms of understanding Anna's bringing to the table, although a lot of our gentrification has not been good to the Black and brown community, but hopefully their efforts can be of use in dealing with what we're dealing with now. So I'd like to know more about it, actually.
Sarah, I appreciate, yeah, I mean, that's what community is all about, right? People poured into me, and so then I'm an adult now and I get to pour into young people and do that in a way that's systemic and that is bringing other people along, right? We had a lot of success stories that we wanted to share, but for sake of time, we're like, maybe we shouldn't. And I also have some feelings about sharing stories of young people because of privacy issues. But I talked to two specific, or actually 5 families today to say, hey, if it comes up and we have the opportunity. So I want to share one because I think the importance of officers understanding what it is that we're trying to do, right, is what is vital and key. There was one of our diversion kids. He was brought to us, kind of, his name kept popping up in different things, and was brought to us because he got caught smoking weed off campus in the city. And so his site was referred to our diversion program. He comes in and, you know, mom's super distrusting. And I've seen this before. I know what you all are about. We kind of said, no, like, you know, trust us. This is a different program, different approach. And I'm going to put Roy on blast a little bit. And Roy's like, yeah, I don't know if this young person is going to really be with it and whatever. And so after we did the assessment and the young person really shared everything that was happening, Roy had a change of heart, right? Roy said, man, like, here I've been judging this young person through this lens because I didn't know the whole story, right? And now that I know the whole story, man, let me come alongside and let me try to be an advocate for. So some time goes by, he graduates from our program, and then he gets caught in something else. And there's a decision that we have to make about whether or not we're going to bring him back into our diversion program or we're going to send him to court and probation. Mm-hmm. And we decided to bring him back into our diversion program because we knew him and we knew that, you know, he was just a young man that needed just a little bit more guidance, a little bit more love. And I had a conversation with his mom today, and she specifically said, if it were not for you all making that decision, he would have been in a different place, right? He would have been not just in front of a juvenile judge, but would have more than likely been caught up because they would have looked at behavioral things in the school. They would have looked at all these different things because we know the way that system works. And so for me, it's about how do we create a firewall within that system to make sure that we do not push kids further along. But it takes people working with the young people directly in order for them to really understand it, right? And so I like to use that example and put Roy on the spot a little bit, just because I think it's a good example of how young people connecting with officers can really have a life impact.
It also changes the trajectory of the youth, right? And so that's, again, part of the essence of this work, not only for our youth, but for our community of color, to be seen and to be given an opportunity. And I think that sort of exemplifies, you know, what we're trying to aim at and be strategic about it.
Becky, Mark, do you have a question too? So we'll do Becky and then Mark. And I think you're both on mute.
Yeah.
So how many of these youth in your diversion program came from PAL?
I don't have the exact number, but less than a handful. I want to say it's either 3 or 4.
And there are, Thomas, there are still two parts of PAL, Virginia Avenue and Olympic?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I may be jumping ahead to budget, but what percentage of the police budget is attributable to the programs the wonderful programs we just heard about? Roughly.
So the juvenile, I'll speak to that very quick, sir. The juvenile diversion program is currently funded with $75,000 The DARE program itself cost us roughly the same amount of money. The SRO program is not budgeted separately. The Explorer program is budgeted, and I believe that also runs us roughly $80,000. And I'll just go back to the juvenile diversion program and parent project. Although it's budgeted for currently budgeted for $75,000, that's a new ask of us. Prior to it wasn't, we did not have a budget for it, and when we did the research, we looked and learned that we were spending roughly $150,000 a year on officer time, as well as supplies and expenses and other miscellaneous costs. But it is currently budgeted at $75,000.
Thank you. So it adds up. We're in the several $100,000 range, it sounds like, in a $100 million budget, right? So less than 1%, I think, if I'm doing my math right.
That's correct. Not including personnel cost.
Right, and the reason I'm asking is because I think what the committee is trying to do is possibly change the proportion, because what a community invests in with dollars should represent the values and the strategic goals and the philosophy. And I'm just raising the question. We're not going to solve it here, but I think we should solve it. Almost unanimously, everyone supported these wonderful programs. There's some, you know, this SROs, there were some questions, but relatively, and thinks that this prevents crime, prevents lots of bad family situations, prevents mental health issues, things that we all have to deal with later on. Yet the amount of money that's allotted to it is quite small. So I'm just raising the point that as we look at a holistic approach to public safety and wellness and well-being, these are the kinds of things we should look at from a financial point of view. Proportionality to how it meets our values and our philosophy. That's all.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Do we have another presenter?
Yes, Lisa, we do. So I'm going to turn the mic over here to Captain Rodriguez and Captain Jacob.
I hope everyone can hear me. I apologize that we're running late, and we will try to streamline this as much as we can and get to it. But I think it's important that we do talk about our training that we do in the police department, because that's a huge issue, and a lot of things that is on everybody's mind. What do police officers train in? How often do we train in that? And what's that? So this is kind of an overview of that, and we'll move along. As you all know, or maybe some of you don't know, all police officers in California are subject to the California Post, which stands for Police Officer Standards and Training. And that overall government board who makes those training are police officers, academics, people in the community who make up our training for what we do in the police departments. And so that the training that they receive in Redwood, California is the same of training that goes down in San Ysidro, California at our southern border, so that all police officers get the same amount of training and the same exact training. So they set that curriculum for us. And part of that is of our training is continued professional training. We're required by Post to have 24 hours every 2 years of that training. And that includes a variety of different things depending on what you have going on. But a mandated part that we do here every year is a perishable skills training. And we call it advanced officer training. Part of that is advanced arrest and control, driving, tactical firearms, and communication skills on how we talk to people. The Santa Monica Police Department also puts on its own training and has training programs that we do, that we certify courses through Post. And those include our arrest control, which includes our de-escalation, which happens every year. Currently, our AB 392, the new use of force training, tactical firearms and things of that nature. Also bicycle school, where you see our officers riding bikes downtown, ATVs and for the beach. We put on those schools in-house through our train the trainer courses. We also are required by legislative training when the legislator puts out new rules. And so part of that is you'll hear about it, RIPA, Racial Identity and Profiling Act. And so that mandates stuff. Domestic violence mandates different training for police officers to go to that's outside and beyond of our normal training that we're required to do. We also do monthly trainings that we have to do on a set policy in our own department that we require. And that's our harassment policy, vehicle pursuit training, and how and I don't know if most people know, but we haven't had in Santa Monica, we have then it was a very liberal pursuit policy, but we haven't chased a stolen car in the city of Santa Monica in probably 35 years. And that's because of our pursuit policy. And we just don't do it because we don't believe that putting the public at risk is worth that for pursuits. We also do new hire training. So for every new police officer that comes into Santa Monica, whether they be lateral police officers or whether they be new police officers out of the academy, we still train them on the way we do things here. And that includes a bunch of different things, starting off even before we put them in the field. So starting off with our entire policy program. How do we do it? And why do we do it this way? And our encouragement of doing that way. I will now hand it over to my partner because we're trying to move along because I know you guys have questions and we don't want to keep you here later than possible as long as we have to.
Wow. Hello. Good evening. Thank you all for hanging in there with us. And it feels an honor to be passed along by Captain DJ here. We're like brothers. We tend to argue and fight at times, and it's what makes us better as an organization to do what's right for you as a community and for us as an organization. Just real quick, a little bit about me. I'm sure you got the bios, but I was one of those, I think it was asked about those who grew up here and all that fun stuff. I was actually born here at St. John's Hospital, grew up locally here in Culver City, have plenty of ties here to the city of Santa Monica. I have two older children, one 26 who actually graduated from high school here locally, went to St. Monica's, and I have another son who's 20 who also graduated from St. Monica's and definitely in and about the community very frequently. And I have a newborn. Yes, I have a 14-month-old who's at home trying to learn how to walk. He's taken 4 or 5 steps right now, and he too was born at my hospital, being St. John's Hospital. So yeah, I'm ingrained in the city. I've been part of this community for a long time. Aside from my upbringing, I was actually been a police officer here for 23 years. So I think I'm the older statesman of the police department employee here that you're talking to today. I started working in another department 2 years prior to that and started here in 1997. The department looked very, very different in 1997. And even then, when I came here, this police department was far advanced from what the organization I came from, and which is why we have in this organization many officers who lateral from other departments to this police department, to your community, to Santa Monica Police Department, because we really embody working with our community. That's very important to us, and I saw that when I first came in. I know we've been talking about the Guardian versus Warrior mentality. The organization I came to was the us versus them mentality. Definitely only working as warriors. When I came here, I clearly saw a significant difference in us working as guardians. Majority of our time is spent worked as guardians of you as a community. I firmly believe that is very, very important. When we get into training, which is what I'm supposed to talk to, I'll get into that now. You see that's on the screen here. Some of the training that we do, and this is not the only training we do, that's what we consider community-based training. There's a lot of that. Racial profiling training we all went through back in 2015. That also included us going to the Museum of Tolerance. I've heard you folks talk about that here in this group. I personally have been to the Museum of Tolerance 3 times myself, and I think you'll find several people within this police department have been with it multiple times too. The Museum of Tolerance is a great experience. Not only do our officers have to go through that, went through in 2015, all of our sergeants go through a program. It's an 8-month leadership program called SLI, Supervisors Leadership Institute. In that program, you go through a week-long process at the Museum of Tolerance. So basically all your field sergeants that are out there in the field, all your lieutenants, and typically us as captains have all been through museum of tolerance training for a whole week. We're going to get into deeper. I'm trying my best to be as quick as possible. I think I'm going a little long, but to go with principal policing, we're going to talk a little more in depth in that here very shortly. Then we also do a lot of training when it comes to tactical communication. And that also entails into doing de-escalation techniques, doing what we can to avoid uses of force. This is something that has required every 2 years of us as a police department. We've done it in 2017 and 2019, and we feel it's so important that we're doing it again here in 2020. I think DJ here mentioned it a little while ago. We have something that's called Advanced Officer Training, and in 2016, we did what's called Transgender Awareness Training. The entire department went through that, and that was hosted by our LGBT community here in Los Angeles, and they provided that from that center. It was a very, very unique experience for our officers, and everybody went through that. The next topic, I think some of you may have gone through this, and this was created actually by our former chief, Jackie Seabrooks. It was the discussion when it came to the community conversations, the cultural awareness talk, and that was basically a way for us to basically sit down and talk, discuss the historical background of the African-American communities here in Santa Monica, and also our Hispanic community, what they've been through here in the Pico neighborhood. It was a deep dive into that, and it delved into conversations that we had directly and just kind of started those discussions. We did several of those, and we really think we should get those going again. That's something we're looking to try to experience and start doing it again, because we think it was very successful, and it will work towards bridging that gap that may be happening now. We do a lot of mental illness training. That happens, we did an 8-hour post-course, again as a standardized training back in 2015. A lot of officers, especially the team that Erica is on, who are here from the help team, they go through a lot of mental illness training themselves. There's a lot of training going on that particular front. We do a lot of what's called use of force de-escalation training. We went through an AOT course, which again, an advanced officer training course for 8 hours in 2018. And again, this is something that's already worked within our policy, that use of force is something that we need to abide by, and that's in there within our policy manual. Looking at a program that I think Anna was a part of, and so was Roy, the Santa Monica High School group discussions that they've had, going directly to the high schools, dealing with some students that are within a government class. They go out there and they basically talk to the youth directly about their experiences with the police department. And they talk about what they have and what we can do to better relate our relationships with the youth in our community. Hate crime reporting, that's something that came in back in 2018-19, and it's a course where basically we have a great understanding of what we need to basically classify as a hate crime, and then we make sure officers know what falls into that particular parameter. AB use of force, AB 392 use of force recently, as you know, came into effect this year in 2020. We were aware that this was coming in 2019. We quickly started telling our officers what that involves. That meant a 15-minute video initially to talk about what changes we were looking at as far as that assembly bill offered. And that now it's turned into a 2-hour course where officers have a clear understanding of when and how they can use deadly force. If we can go on to the next slide, I think DJ will go on from there.
Yeah, so going back again, so in 2014, then President Obama signed an executive order creating a community task force of policing, a task force on policing. In 2015, the 21st century policing model was released. The Santa Monica Police Department embraced that, and we took that. And so part of there were 6 pillars. I'm sure I read George's 800-page, 900-page paper on that, which basically details a lot of that and goes into depth about those proposals and what happens in those 6 pillars. But part of that, the principal policing, we were in 2015. We came out at we actually sent members went to a trainer course at the Museum of Tolerance. With the co-instructor, which is the Reverend Ben McBride, who was a minister out of Oakland. And he had a lot of things. And actually, I thought we were doing a lot of things right. And I know Roy had talked about, we do things wrong. And it's admitting that we do things wrong. And I think in 2015, it opened a lot of folks' eyes about how we did work and how we viewed people. And that killing of the warrior mentality versus the guardian mentality. even so much, and a little bit about me, I know some of you may know, some of you may not know. I came here, I've been here for about 16 years. I lateraled here from the LA County Sheriff's Department, which had a different organizational culture than here. And I think you can, all of you have probably been reading the news about some of those deputy gangs and those things that have been going on. That stuff doesn't exist here in Santa Monica. And that was one of the reasons I came here, because I saw diversity. I saw training. I saw different people. I saw how people treated the community. So that was one of the big things that brought me here. So then we went to Stockton. There was a train-the-trainer course. We got folks together, and then we came up with our own 8-hour principal policing course, and that was mandatory for all members of the department to go through. And since then, every bit of training that we do, right? Training creates culture, and how you train and what you train lets everyone know up and down the chain of command what we value and what we expect and what we want you to do and how we want you to do it. So even in our defensive tactics, years ago when I was defensive tactics sergeant, we train people that, hey man, everyone has a camera on you, so everything that you do is going to be out there. When we train every young officer that comes in, and I talk to every officer that has come in since 2015, and with our duty to intercede, and we tell them, and I tell them specifically, and you can ask any officer that's come in since 2015, if you have a duty to intercede, and you must treat people the right way. You must treat people like they're your brother, like they're your sister, like they're somebody else's brother, because we're all community, and we're all attached, and we're all involved with each other. And if you fail to stop that, if you fail to do what we ask you to do, I will fire you. I will hang you. I will burn your badge. I will break it in half and hang it on a wall, because that's what we believe, and that's the culture that we set here in this police department. So, next slide.
All right, back to me. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Thank you. You're good. Yeah, thank you, DJ. I think, again, without talking about it, everybody knows in the principal policing program, very clear discussions about explicit and implicit bias. The explicit bias, again, is something that's more outwardly out in the open. And I think when it comes to explicit bias, what we do as an organization, we do our best to try to weed out those individuals when they're trying to get hired and not hire those people. So we have a very, very thorough background process so that we don't bring on people that bring those stereotypes and those biases that are openly out there. We look at officers or people that are trying to become officers, their social media accounts, talk to their friends, talk to their neighbors, dig as deep as we can to find out if there's anything like that out there. If that's the case, much like you don't want them out working in your streets, we don't want them working in our building either. However, you may have some that slip the cracks, and if that does happen, we have policies in place that allow us to deal with those issues and potentially terminate an individual if they are showing certain behaviors that may be explicitly biased towards certain genders, certain races, or certain ethnicities, if you will. So that will happen. The one that's a little more difficult to find, again, is the implicit bias. We all have certain biases that are, I think, worked in within who we are as individuals, where we come from. This may not be an implicit bias, but my mother is the best Mexican food cook in the world. Nobody can beat it. I can't find any mole that anybody can cook any better than my mother. I'm sorry. For those of you who have moms who cook food, she's the best cook in the world. That's a bias that I have, and you can never get rid of that. But I think what we do is talk about these issues, race diversity, who we are as individuals. This allows people to open their minds and hopefully make better decisions. So when it comes to making a critical decision of how and where you treat individuals, that'll happen organically, hopefully, through these discussions that we have. Officers open their minds. And if we continue to have these discussions, we are hopeful that some of those implicit biases that people may have that are worked in within your own person, if you will, that it'll be a better decision made. Next slide. Going on to DJ.
So part of the principal policing, I mean, there's four big tenets of that, and in that, and we really stress this, right? One of that is voice, and making sure that a community has the voice, like what's happening now, and that's listening, and understanding, and that's standing back and giving people the opportunity to tell us their stories, and then step back and value their perspective, and understand that, and wait, and then wonder what we can do better and how we can do it. And I think we're involved in that process. We've always been involved in that process, and we're there. Next is neutrality. We want to be fair. We want to make unbiased decision making and explain our decision making and have a reason to do that and have an understanding. When we get sent and what we really try, where this one is really big, is you know, I know that some of the terms that folks use, weaponizing the police against people of color, or meaning somebody calls on us and then we end up and having to deal with the situation now that involves two people, and somebody's called the police to deal with this particular situation where maybe we shouldn't have even been called out to. And now it's up for us to go, okay, this is not a police matter, and try to figure out the best ways to connect those folks together to try to have some type of understanding, and that we're listening to every voice and all people that give us a call and whoever we have contact with.
All right, so I got the next two real quick. So the next one is respect. It is already worked in within our core values. Our core values are I care, integrity, courage, accountability, respect, and innovation. So respect is already worked in there. For me, I'll tell you a personal story. I worked 12 years working at a unit where basically sometimes you had to go out and look for individuals who may have committed the most heinous crimes in our city, such as murder, rape, shootings, assault with deadly weapons. And we would seek those individuals, and when they were taken into custody, they were under arrest, and we were done. What I mean by that is we're taking an individual's freedom away, but at the same time, we have to maintain their dignity, treat them as individuals, treat them as persons. And we do that by showing respect. And if we as individuals that are up here on this floor, being your captains and commanders, have that philosophy, it'll carry down to the rest of the troops. And the team that I was on, we really believed, again, at the end of the day, once our job was done, there's no additional action needed. Treat people with respect and dignity. And you do that across the board to the entire community. Trust. Without trust of our community, we cannot get community support. We have to maintain public trust. That is something that's worked in. We have to be very transparent with what we do and how we do it. And I firmly believe with us being here today, you guys listening to us and wanting to ask questions and be part of this process, this is a big step in that right direction to gaining your trust and making sure that you know that we are individuals and a police organization of character that's here to basically serve you as a community and do what's right for you as a person. Again, at the end of the day, the goal is to improve trust and relationships between law enforcement agencies and their communities. DJ, I'll let you close it out.
Again, thank you all for the time. I know there's probably a lot of questions, and there's a lot of hard work that's going into what you're doing. We want to be part of the solution and help you get there. Thank you.
I see George, Mike, and Robbie right in a row.
Yeah, I just want to offer a comment. I don't expect you to agree with me necessarily. What I want to do is channel Nat a little bit, so maybe Nat will agree with me. I first want to thank you all for coming here and telling us about all of the great things that you're doing and that you're proud of, and you know, they deserve commendation. And I also want to say that it seems a little inconsistent, and this is the point that I think Nat is trying to make. It seems a little inconsistent with the feel that I am getting of a little bit of denialism, a little bit of resistance to change. As I sit here, I see a lot of great folks on this committee who are deeply embedded in the community in Santa Monica and have been active for, and they're saying we want to change some things. And you know, many of us have been feeling a pandemic of racism for decades in policing, among other things. And then, as we all know, a series of high-profile murders happened that shocked the conscience of the entire nation. And I remember saying to my wife when we were watching the protests in Minneapolis, where I grew up, there's white people out in the streets. And in Santa Monica, people were out in the streets. And they didn't have signs that said on there, we're unhappy except for Santa Monica. And so my point is this, you're saying a lot of really terrific things. I like the fact that you embrace 21st century community-oriented policing. Part of that model involves listening to the community. I mean, you just said that it involves listening to the community. And to me, and here's where I go back to channeling Nat, what that suggests to me is that the move is to embrace change, to get in front of it, to say to this committee and other people in the community, I see that you're unhappy with us. What can I do to help? And what I'm sensing is not that. What I'm sensing is, gee, these people are unhappy with us. How can we explain it and make them go away? And so all I'm saying is, and I don't expect a response, all I'm saying is that you're doing a lot of good things. You're proud of what you do. At the same time, you face this profound inconsistency that people deeply connected in the community are still unhappy and they want change. And so all I'm saying is you have an opportunity to get in front of it, and I would urge you to take it.
I'd like to echo George saying thank you guys for being here. You know, you mentioned the last time that you had done racial profiling training was in 2015. I think the last time you had done the principled policing was in 2016. You know, I just quickly added up the police budgets since 2015. If you look at 16, 17, 18, 19, that's $350 million that we've spent on policing and not one racial profiling training. If you just look at 17, 18, and 19, that's $270 million spent on police and no principled policing training. So my question is, rather than looking at it as just checking boxes, and I asked this to Officer Jacob on the first night when you were on, to me, if there's training that money is being spent on, there should be specific outcomes that you're trying to achieve with that training. And I would like to ask, guys, tied to each training that you have specific outcomes that you try and measure over time to see if that training is actually effective, or are you just checking the box?
Well, I can answer. Well, I want to speak first to George. You know, George, I hear you, and I guess this doesn't require an answer too. I do think though that when you put a blanket statement on all police departments, and you say that all police departments act this way, or all people act this way, or all of our officers act this way, I think then that that's maybe the resistance that you're getting. Because what I don't think that you see, or I mean, you went into this work without asking about us and wondering about us or what we're doing. And so how we feel sometimes, or at least how I feel, is that we've had this use of force policy, right? That's out there, and 98% of the things that you're asking for, we already do. And those are some of the issues that I think sometimes we feel like, I don't want to use the word prejudged, but we're prejudged simply because we wear a badge and a patch. And I don't know if that's unfair, and I don't know. And that's why I think today's message was to try to get an attempt to put out who we are and what we are about. That's it. And to Mike's question, I don't know how you put how do you quantify, are we stopping less Black people than we were 20 years ago? Yeah. I mean, how do you put a quantifiable question mark or number on, is our training effective? We can look at the number of cases that we do have and what we're doing. And I know we're working to get that stuff to you, but there's a baseline someplace. And I mean, is it from the 70s? Is it back to 5 years, 10 years? I don't know, Michael. But we're willing to work with you and give you whatever numbers that you get. I told Lisa You know, we're giving you our RA cases, we're giving you those numbers. Some of those things have to be picked out of data. We don't have a magic, unfortunately, we don't have a magic database that produces those numbers for us, but we're working on them for you. Because I do anticipate this going longer than it is right now and what we have going on. And you deserve those numbers. People deserve to understand what their tax dollars are going for. No one here is in any disagreement with you about that. And so we're willing to try to figure out what that may be on how you do it. But are you asking us, do we set goals and what that is? That would come up to some type of solution that we already have had a problem or looking at it. And I don't know what that number is. I don't know what that is, Michael. But I'm willing to work with you on it. I really am.
Hey, DJ, if I could add something else too, Michael, just to be very clear, this is just training that we've identified that the entire department has gone through. Many times you have what's called roll call training sessions that happen that may not be captured here, that are happening individually within units. So those discussions are happening here, just didn't capture it amongst the entire organization. I know there was discussion about the George Floyd incident. Nobody in this building at all, we were appalled just as much as everybody else was in here. And I'm pretty certain that there was a lot of discussion internally within a roll call setting to talk about that, to go briefly into that, but that's something that's not captured here. When I talked about the training that we've done, again, this is training we know the entire organization has gone
I want to give George or Michael, I don't know if you guys have any follow-up comments, and then it's Robbie and Rasika.
No follow-up. So should I go?
Yeah.
Okay, so my deal is this. I appreciate you guys coming here and presenting. I kind of look at this, and anybody who knows me knows that I use a lot of parables and analogies or whatever, but I look at this like a marriage that's going or gone bad. But the communication has, in other words, when your spouse knows what you want because you've been asking for it for years. You've been asking and you've been telling, you've been asking and you've been telling to no avail. And now that everything has blown up in our faces, it's instead of coming and saying, we know what you've been asking for, this is what we've done, or this is what I've done. What I feel, I kind of understand George, Nat, everybody feel is, what you're saying is, we want to tell you about us and what we're doing, rather than coming and saying, we know what some of the things that you want. What else can we do better? But we know some of the things that you want because you've been talking about it for years. And just to put a pin in that, some of the things we've been talking about with Coalition Police Reform, who have been meeting with the chief city managers for years, we were talking about community engagement way before COVID. Chief, I don't know if you remember, but it was way before COVID. So my thing is, what are you coming with that, what I know what you've been asking for, this is what we've already done about that. We've corrected that. So now what else can we do? That's what I was looking for. And in regards to AB 953, Jacqueline Seabrooks had said that was going to be rolled out. She was going to make sure that would be rolled out early. I don't think it's supposed to be until 2022. So I'd like to know, Chief, is that going to happen? But like I said, instead of coming and saying, what do you want? What have you done already to make things better? Because we've been asking, that's why people are protesting down at the, police station. Not just because of May 31st, but because enough is enough. They're tired and they want things to, you to come, get in front of everything, gather up all the, things that people have been asking for and already have corrected that. And then when you come to this meeting, what now? What more can we do? I think that might have been better received, but, maybe that's just me.
So, Robbie, our intention tonight was to come and talk about some of the core things we do that we weren't all the way sure that the committee knew about. And in that discussion, there are things that can inform your work moving forward. And an example of that is with Anahara talking about JDP and even the Parent Project. Mark was already doing some math number figures, and there was conversation. I think where your committee might take that to is based on an understanding of JDP, talking about, are there areas in the department where you can shift resources and funding to bolster that great program that you do, that connection with your youth. There was also a lot of discussion around the neighborhood resource officers and the community affairs program. And I would think that there might be discussion among your team moving forward along the same lines of how can budgets and resources be shifted to bolster and support that program, programs like it in both of those arenas, which is community engagement and youth engagement. So for training and culture here in the police department, to kind of hit on the fact that the tenets of 21st Century Task Force on Policing, 4 tenets of principled policing, are philosophies that we have instilled here in this organization and began to a few years ago. With that said, that was the only intention. It was not an intention to come here and say, this is what we do, this is all we do for our training and culture, and we're done here. But we didn't know if this community, if this group was fully aware of that's in place, and then let's talk moving forward from there. And you're right, Robbie, you and I have been talking about that community engagement piece, particularly with the new hires now for quite a while. We hire in spurts and in different size numbers. And unfortunately, we've been in the COVID-19 posture now since March, but even before that, I had told and worked with the training staff to find these times and these ways, as you and I talked about, for all of the stakeholders to come in, all the stakeholder community groups to come in and work with those officers and those new hires. We're going to have to continue to move forward to get that done in an environment where we can physically be together. And then those are starting points, and there are other several great ideas and several things that you all will come up with. In order to impact police culture, it's done in the training environment, it's done in the new hire setting environment, in advanced officer training environment, and it's done through community connections, and we are committed to having that dialogue moving forward.
And in regards to AB 953, are we rolling that out early?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me about AB 953. So AB 953, the Racial Identity Profiling Act, it's triggered based on the size of your organization. That is morphing and changing as it goes through and as different agencies begin to work with it and the questions become changed and morphed. But AB 953 is also a technological solution. You have to have a data package so that the officers can capture that information, and it has to get uploaded into a technology platform so that it can then be used. We're currently right now working to go through what's called a CAD, Computer Aided Dispatch, and RMS, Records Management Service. We need to buy a new computer system. Our technology is very outdated there, and it has to be one that can work with or talk to an AB 953 compliant software package. Our current report writing system and different ways to track that information is archaic and can't do it. So we're committed to gathering and that data, but there's also a technology piece to it that we have to be able to tackle at the same time.
So the answer is no, it's not going to be rolled out early, as the previous chief had suggested.
I don't know what timeline she committed to. We're set to go in 2022, I believe, which is already right around the corner. We were in conversations with a software company that could have it can't overlay onto the system that we currently have. But Robbie, I'll follow up with you on when we can implement that based on when we can actually gather that data.
Go ahead, Rasika, and then Daryl.
So I know we've been talking a lot about, the trainings, as Chief just mentioned, a lot of the changes that need to be made are implemented during these trainings. I know that there is a percentage of trainings that are mandated by the state, but what control do the departments have in what trainings and how often and how many you guys are allowed to participate?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rasika. So the Commission on Post mandates a certain number of training hours per year that police officers have to do. And within that, they also mandate perishable skills training. Every year, the numbers and the mandates vary. But on a rough estimate, the mandates take up the majority of that training time, and we're left with a few hours to dedicate to topics that we want to talk about. As I said earlier, every police officer who comes into work has a job that they have to do. And to remove them from that job and have them go to training leaves a hole in that area that has to be filled by someone else. And honestly, that ends up usually involving paying an officer to overtime to come in and work a shift so that we can remove somebody from that duty and have them go to training. So our advanced officer training time throughout the year, it used to be done in 1 week, and it was a pretty heavy hit on the department and cost a fair amount of money to backfill all those positions to take people out for an entire week. I also believe for any of you who have sat in a classroom for 40 hours, by the time you get to your last day, you're almost not really paying attention anymore. It's been a long time sitting in the classroom. And so we've dismantled that week, and we do 1 day a trimester. We find, or at least I believe, that officers are more engaged when it's a 1 day training session, and they participate more fully. So each calendar year, our training changes based on what the post mandates are. I would be happy to provide this committee with our current mandates from post and what the calendar of training looks like, if that is something that you're interested in seeing for this year.
Yeah, we would definitely be interested in seeing that, because I guess my worry is, like you stated yourself, the culture and everything that's kind of wrong, that we're trying to change, needs to be changed from the starting point from training. And it just sounds like there isn't enough money or enough time or enough people to go through these trainings. There's a lot of like blockages into moving forward with these things. So it's making me a little wary about how we're going to be able to change what we need to change if we're already saying, or we're already hesitant from the start because of time or money or manpower, if you will.
Yeah, we're not hesitant, but I just do want to have all the facts for you at your disposal. And one of those facts is about some of our constraints, because we're a 24/7 operation. We don't all work Monday through Friday at the same time. And because our workload is truly dictated for us based on calls from the community for service and crimes that occur. So that's not, it's a fact that we have to work with, but it's not going to deter us or stop us. But it's something that I felt you all should have as a fact as you plan to move forward.
Daryl and then Angela.
When Mark was talking about budget, I was listening to Ms. Howard and Ms. Cruz, and they have intuitive knowledge and academic knowledge that knows how to work these young people and have them transition from secondary to post-secondary. And seeing as how the city broke their contract with the community, a big partnership, they should give that funding to them to help them carry out their mission. 150,000, what they're doing now, another 300,000 would be more than well spent for them to work with that population. The second thing is trust in terms of us dealing with this. G.C. Brooks helped develop trust because she acknowledged that other people from outside the community were trying to do damage to us. And I think she clearly demonstrated on her, before she left, the commitment to the community to make it safe from outside agitators. To that end, when I spoke to the city on the 31st of May, my request was do not beat the hell or beat the shit out of anybody. And for the most part with clubs, that did not happen. And on Juneteenth, we had another demonstration in Venice, and I asked the same thing to Commander Brooker for LAPD. And there, we just asked them to let our community protest the way they needed to and to shoo away the others. I mentioned that because Chief Renault on Juneteenth, she called and said, is there anything we can do to help? I said, shoo away anybody come out the freeway doesn't look like they're gonna be, we know a profile the way they looked. There were young groups, a lot of African Americans were in Santa Monica, 16 to 38. And to Anna's point, these young people did something very stupid, and we know, meeting with the chief of police in LA, and we know that they're doing a collaborative to go back and identify and pick these people up. Some of them may be salvageable that did in Santa Monica. Her initiative would speak to helping those people who did really stupid things, but they're not vicious people. So I think there are some things that the department has to trust us in our experience and what we're bringing to the table. And we have to trust in some of the initiatives they've done. You know, we all know that we've been on opposite ends of the poles, and we had to come back together after that. But we do have some history where we got to build on that trust and be open. The department and the community has to be open to say, there was a time, Nat can speak to this, Santa Monica PD was going to beat over 300 of us marching back in 70. Now Quinn informed us and told us where not to go so they could not beat us. We would be in a different position if we had a lot of those looters are young Black males and young women and Latinos. If they had beat the shit out of those people, we'd be in a whole different frame. Now, the rest of LA weren't so lucky. But because we had the relationship on the west side, we didn't have that carnage. Yes, they used the spray. We got to work those challenges out and that projectile. But we're a far cry from brutality and torture that the rest of, particularly LAPD did, as opposed to what we did on the west side. So just in moving forward, I think that, again, we have to be open, and I suggest that we be part of their training so the officers know that we're there, they're there, everyone's involved. And the new re-imaging is very important. We're writing that up, but that's just where we got to save lives, we got to save futures, and these are our children and our citizens. And like I said, gentrification, you know, the early Santa Monica, white Santa Monica, did a good job of running Black and brown people out of the community. But I think now, hopefully, we have a healthier community to accept those who come in this city on a daily basis and respect the residents that are here. That's all I gotta say.
Angela and then Mark.
Yeah, so I had a question regarding, and we've talked about this in various subgroups, and we were wondering as far as mental health checkup for the officers when they have recently experienced any type of violent incidents. How often is that conducted? You know, as far as, say they witnessed, they had to take a call for a murder or, a child abuse situation, domestic abuse situation, something like that, that was just, very traumatizing. So we're wondering, how is that addressed from an officer perspective? Because after a while, you can become desensitized, right? And we know that it is a fairly large suicide rate for officers as well. So I'm just wondering how you guys are tackling that.
So I can answer that. So initially, after one of the pillars of the 21st century policing was officer well-being and officer wellness, and so we started tackling that. So typically, what happens if an officer would get into an officer-involved shooting, they would get the mandated 3 days off, and the type A, type machismo type of personality cops. We'd come back to work, and then we started to see something, right? We started to see our officers go down. And mentally having issues with that because it's not the human being, no matter how much training, no matter how much desensitization that you may have. I was in the Navy as well, Angela. I saw that you were in there. There's no there's no amount that people can take. And so we changed how we deal with officers. So when officers, anytime we believe an officer has any type of a mental issue, meaning if they go to an officer involved shooting, they see a horrific accident, when we go to dead body calls or dead baby calls, or anything that triggers an officer to have some type of reaction. And even May 31st, right? Our officers we send them to a psychiatrist for an evaluation and type of counseling. And we offer the MEAP as well, Employee Assistance Program. And then our officers are required to go back at the 3 month, they're required to go back at the 3 month, at the 6 month, at the 9 month, and the 12 month period again, to make sure that they're okay and functioning well.
And Angela, if I can just add a little bit to that, because what you brought up is such an important question. One of the strongest things that we do here to support each other is called our peer support program. We have police officers who, from different walks of life, phenomenal human beings. Sergeant Doug Woodhams right now is very instrumental in our peer support program. Lieutenant Mike Federico was just the founding force for that program. We have many peer support counselors here in the department that have been through traumatic and horrific things. They do a fantastic job of reaching out to their partners. We also proactively make some referrals, which shows the caring of this work team, one for another. There are officers who notice that other officers are struggling, and they make a peer support recommendation. From that to the support of not only our psychiatrists, but the POA also keeps a blanket purchase order on file where it'll never be known to anyone, but officers can avail themselves of that professional help. And this department does a good job of caring for each other and caring for themselves. We've had some very traumatic things consistently. It's the nature of our job. But even in the past month, our officers were dispatched to a 15-year-old girl who had hung herself, and her father discovered her family did. And we wrapped around those officers to check in with them. At the end of the day, there is no denying that what we see and what we do profoundly impacts our hearts and our souls. And we have to internalize that, and it changes us in some way. And the question is, does it change us in a way that still makes us good community partners, or does it change us in a way that hardens us? And we strive to provide resources and support for officers so that it is always the former and not the latter.
I can just add something to that. I know this occurred actually before Chief Renaud got here. Back in 2018, if you haven't heard, there's a doctor by the name of Dr. Gil Martin, very well known within the policing community. He talks about emotional survival. He deals with how you can cope with stressful situations, not only here, but don't take it home, so that you have an officer that comes to work in their community that is well balanced. Talks about finding outlets to where you can actually be a better and more productive person holistically here and at work. And he teaches an emotional survival class, and he actually has a book that he printed. It's a very good book. I wish I had that class when I was a 2-year, 3-year officer. Unfortunately, I got it when I was 20-something years on. But we all went through that program back in 2018. It was a very, very good class that talks about officer well-being. And I see Mark has his hand up, and I'll go ahead and give it to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. And you should all know, everyone who's representing PD here tonight, we all have utmost respect for how hard a job it is, and how dangerous a job it could be mentally and physically. So that's a given here, and I hope you all can understand that. What I'm hearing for the first time, and I don't know about my colleagues, is that this is sounding less like a lobbying campaign and more like a conversation. And I think that's a step in the right direction that we've made tonight. So hopefully we can maintain that. I don't think anyone can say that we have not opened up our calendars and our ears to the positions of our police department. I say our police department, the community's police department. Let me make one last point, and what the standard is. This is Santa Monica. By that I mean, we don't just want to be good, okay, passable. we pride ourselves on being really good at being leaders. And that's where I keep coming back to, and I think we have to keep coming back to this, the concept of best practices as we look at what we are trying to solve for. Whether it's the best practice higher than the constitutional standard for use of force, whether it's review and accountability, whether it's training. We should be looking at best practices and looking at ourselves and saying, are we the leader here? Are we at the front of the line? Are we doing this better than everybody or almost everybody? Otherwise, we're not being who we are. And this is an opportunity to collaborate, get past, some of the rougher part of the conversation to do that. And I hope we can, because as all of you folks know on the phone, 2-3 weeks from now, that first report to the council, that's just the beginning of a long process, a very detailed process. So I hope this can be the launching point for that, with best practice and heart as as informing everything we do from this point on.
Yes, thank you for that, Mark. Appreciate that.
Anyone else with any final comments? I don't think we have any more presentations, right?
Well, actually, we did have budget, but perhaps we save that for another night.
I don't know. Let's see a thumbs up, thumbs down vote. Do we want to do the budget right now? Let me see. 1, 2, oh.
I guess it depends on how long you think you need to present what you have.
Thumbs popped up like popcorn. Most people want it.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Popcorn.
Okay, everybody, so that's me. I will do my best to make it quick and short, but as informative as I can. I've been listening to your conversations and
Captain,
first and foremost, before I start.
Captain, before you start, this is Matt Travis.
Yes, sir.
Where's that guy, Rodriguez? He's supposed to be the senior captain. What's your serial number? What's your serial number?
Okay, I'm off mute, Nat. It's not serial number 10 like you, sir.
I'm 1459. Good night, folks. I go to bed at 9 o'clock every night.
Good night, Nat. Thank you.
It's 3155.
See, turn it upside down. Good night, folks. Good program.
Good night, Nat.
Good night. Okay, so first and foremost, I want to say thank you all for your participation. I know it's taken a lot of commitment hours, and you guys are really in there diving deep into the conversation. And I know for many of you, this is a long time coming. And talking with you in the ways that I have offline, I know that this type of reform committee is something that you've been interested in starting and talking about. So I understand that there's a lot of angst in getting this to move forward. And so I don't think there's anyone here on this executive team that is going to push back on you. I think that, like you said, there's a couple of things that came up that resonated with me. 1, community. 2, conversations. 3, synergy. Thank you, Angela. I love that word. And I think what you have here on this platform today are us saying to you, listen, we take a lot of pride in what we do. Our officers are out there, they're doing great things. They're trying to do great things. And we take a lot of heart in changes that we've made. We're very responsive, we're very reactive to the community and that what we do. And so I think when Captain Jacob was talking about principal policing and Robbie, you came back and basically said, I feel resistance, and George, and that it's not that. It's like, listen, we're out there, we're doing these things. If you guys feel we need to do more of them, great. Then that's the conversation that needs to be had. So enough of that. I'll go on to police budget and we can just chat about it. If we can go to the next slide. Basically, this is the first time that I've dealt with budget, so please forgive me. I'm new to this particular division. I came from traffic, that's my background. So basically the police budget for the police department is at $98.9 million. And I know you've had conversations in your subcommittees that the budget is 7% supplies and expenses and 93% salaries and wages. So for those of you who don't know, the police budget normally takes about 23 to 27% of the general fund, which is a huge chunk of the general fund. And don't think that we don't know that. We understand that there's a great deal of responsibility that comes with being a huge participant of that. So, but I wanted to kind of break down where most of that money goes to. So if you look at our vehicle fleet management, maintenance and so forth, we spent about $1.7 million on that from our supply budget, which I remind you is about 7.2. And I know you guys are looking at probably moving money around or this and that. And the window that you have is a little small. So I'm trying to work with you and give you some ideas on where you can possibly look, but these are our big ticket items that you have to understand that are kind of hard costs for us. So our computers and related technology comes out to be about $1.04 million for the year. Our liability insurance about 737. Our utilities, keeping the lights on and so forth, is about 205,000. Office supplies 145,000. Training, and I highlighted training because the commitment of this department to this community and to you is that we want to invest as much money in training as we possibly can. We're really a great department in getting our people trained, and maybe we do need to look at measures on how the benchmarks and how we are measuring training and how applicable it is and what we're doing with that. And that's a great suggestion and worthy of a conversation. So, and I think someone else talked about ammunition and how much exactly we do spend on ammunition. Out of our entire budget, we spend about $67,000 on ammunition. And that includes not just bullets, that's reloads, because we have monthly qualifications. We have about 200 officer monthly qualifications. So, and there's certain times of the year where they have to qualify with their backup weapons, and some of them have 2 to 3 of these things. And so that's where that cost goes. Our ballistic gear and so forth, ballistic gear is like our bulletproof vests. We spend about $67,000 on that, and then maintenance and gunsmithing is another $65,000. So I know there was talk a little bit about the police budget remaining flat, meaning that we didn't take any cuts, we didn't make any cuts, we didn't offer up any cuts, and that is completely not true. So the police department originally made about 3.8% in cuts for the fiscal year, which is from July 1st to June 30th, 2021. So we made these cuts from salaries, overtime reduction, and we looked at staffing. It wasn't easy. It was a very difficult conversation that Chief Renaud had with the senior analyst and trying to figure out where we can cut that's going to have the least impact to our customer service, to our service profile, and basically so that we wouldn't have to really feel a loss in what we take pride in, right? We want to say that we're the benchmark of excellence. And so that's always the moving force behind any cuts that we had to do. And so Chief Renaud and us, we all got together and we realized that animal control has 2 animal attendants, that we could probably create a volunteer program. And so we're willing to kind of go ahead and let those go, because we understand we have to do our part, just like every other city entity had to do their part. So we have that there. It gives us an opportunity to have a robust volunteer program, bringing it back to the community, and that's where we are. We had 4 vacant public safety officer positions. As the chief said earlier in her slide, those 4 positions are those that are in the park in the downtown area. So we kind of saw that they were vacant. We were having issues filling them, COVID and so forth, and we realized, okay, well, we can go ahead and release those back. Sworn officer, the chief gave up 1 vacant position. She decided not to hire on that and leave us at status quo with our numbers. Traffic services, they had a reduction in staff. They weren't really out there doing parking enforcement due to COVID and some other measures, and the city being compassionate with people and the financial crisis that we're in due to the pandemic. So we realized that we could probably lay off on that and lay off on some overtime details, such as go with the flow and the holiday deployment. So holiday deployment happens once a year, and that is done like usually after Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, and it goes until the first week of January. We realized that we could work with the staff that we have, provide the service that we needed, and go ahead and not hire overtime on that. And then the special event termination, it's actually the special event suspension. Twilight Concert Series is something that the city sets up. This year we didn't have it, so we didn't have to worry about that this year. The Coast event is another city event that because of COVID, we're not going to have this year. National Night Out and Coffee with a Cop, those are all things that we're looking at trying to move to a virtual platform so that they're cost neutral, and we're able to continue with those and give those to the community, because we get a lot of positive community feedback on that. And those are programs that are true to our heart, and we want to go forward on those. So just a little bit of budget timeline misnomer. So when the budget was first presented, it was presented at a level of 108 million. Now, for a lot of city departments, their budgets were cut 10% or greater, as you all know. Now, the police department, their budget grew. Okay, well, our budget grew because we were going to absorb the Office of Emergency Management, which is where dispatch is run out of, as well as code enforcement. The city thought about that and decided to go ahead and remove those programs for our budget, which brought us back to about $102 million. Now, the city, in the budget proposal, that's in an addendum. That change is in an addendum. It's not actually in the written language. So when you read the budget for the city, it basically says 108, which makes it look like our budget increased when in reality it decreased. So, and then we went back to the table. We came up with $3.8 million in cuts. And at the end of June, mid-July, the chief was able to find another $486,000 in cuts, bringing us down to $98 million and showing the city a 4.2% in cuts. So you have to be mindful that we're doing what we can to balance our community protection and our service response. So we took a little bit from salaries, we took a little bit from supplies and expenses, and we try to make it as equitable as possible so that nothing in the community would be sacrificed at a level that we felt we couldn't keep up to. And like I said, there's a lot of pride in this department. And so what I say to you is when you're going and you're thinking about what kind of cuts you're going to make or what kind of funds you want to move from one place to another, I ask you to consider what kind of service do you want us to provide to you? And then come back to the table with that and your recommendations and let us know. I mean, we're open, we're here. I know you guys are all tired and I appreciate your time and your energy. And we talked about a lot of heavy things today. So take a moment. I offer my services to you. I'm more than willing to talk to each and every one of you individually about the budget. I have the line items. I know it. So if there's anything that you need me to come back and talk to you about, I'd be more than willing to do that. So that's the budget. It's kind of down and dirty. I apologize for going so fast. I'm trying not to bore you guys and have your eyes roll to the back of your head, but I'll open the floor to questions.
I see one hand raised by someone whose eyes definitely were not rolling in the back of his head. And I just wanted to jump in to say, I think everybody would love to get a copy of this PowerPoint when this is over. So I think we did get a lot of information and we really appreciate it. And I think we all want to make sure that we can refer back to it. So I wanted to say that, and then I'll pass it over to Nick.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that presentation was misleading. The budget was cut from what was originally proposed for 2021. But the 2019-20 final budget was at $94 million, and the 2020-21 budget is at $98 million. That looks like an increase year over year to me. Am I reading something incorrectly?
Well, no, I think when you look at the budget and when it comes out to you, it has to take into consideration like grant funding is part of that number. You have to look at our COPS funding and various other things that come into play that increase that number. So I know in looking at the city, they gave us $98.2 million. They originally started off at 108, and like I said, it went down. But there's other things in the budget that aren't accounted for that look like the number is inflated when in fact it's not.
Okay. One last question. This is actually for the chief. I was really appreciative of Officer Brown earlier, showing almost like humility and saying that things that were done 20, 25 years ago were wrong. And he recognized that. And hearing language like that really, I think, does help us in the community understand a little bit better. So I'd just like to ask you, Chief, if you're looking at what you're doing now, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but 5, 10, 15 years, is there any part of your policies in your department that you think that you'll look back on as being wrong?
So I share your respect for Roy. I've known him now for a couple of years, and even just sitting here listening to him tonight I'm just filled with respect for both he and for Anahara. And I think I want you guys to know that there are a lot of other Roy Browns here in the police department too that we're anxious to make connections with. Moving forward, Robbie had a great analogy of this being a marriage that needs some marriage counseling. But we're not going to get divorced. And so we're going to work through this. And I understand that there are changes that you want to make and improvements that you want to make that improve the relationship between this police department and this community. And a lot of that work can be done through policy. Some of that work can be done through important policy. And a lot of it is done through benchmarking and gating and focusing on some of the things that Roy and Anna talked about. So we're not going to get to all that tonight. When 10 or 15 years from now, when all of us look back, and I'm looking at my computer screen, and Michael, you were over here and now you bounced over there. So I apologize if I look like I'm playing a tennis match here. But when we look back, us together, we're going to write that playbook moving forward in the next few weeks and a few months. And I don't have any preconceived notions, so I'm not going to tell you that this policy or this policy is going to change, because we're going to talk and we're going to figure out together what the pressure points are, and where the police department can deepen this relationship and make sure that we are your police department and what this community is looking for. And I know that it's 9:12. Michael, I'd be happy to meet with you for a cup of coffee 6 feet apart, or a conversation via phone if you'd like, and that goes for everyone on this call.
Thank you so much to everybody, committee members, department members. I think I can surely speak for the whole committee that from week one, people have been asking questions about how we do things in Santa Monica, right? And so we've been working towards building that information, building that storage of information. I think tonight really got us a lot of that information as well. And so, you know, I share everyone's sentiment that we really are all trying to contribute to bring about something great, right? And it doesn't mean that what we have is terrible, but everybody can be better, right? And I think we're all coming at that in that spirit. So unless anyone has any other questions, Rolinda,
I just have a quick question. Oh,
you're good. No, you muted yourself.
I have a quick question. I'm wondering if, and just like the personnel is the biggest line item, and that's something I know everybody hates to address because it's just like, yeah, jobs are everything. They're so important.
Yep.
Nobody wants that at all. But what I'm thinking is, like, when we look at some of the calls and the things that police are responding to, like noise complaints, and I know there was another discussion about, like, yeah, we don't respond to marijuana in schools. That's just a hard line, and everybody knows that, and we just don't do that. Do you feel like there's other things, like in the list of things that police respond to, that they just don't need to either respond to, or that some other agency needs to be responding to that? Because that is the bulk of the budget, right? So that's, I mean, all the other things are not gonna like really make a dent in, you know, reimagining a situation. But if we're willing to think about, and that's why I asked about the dispatch earlier, it's like, do you feel like there's things in there that the police should not be doing? And can that be streamlined in your view at all?
Yeah, a great question. So we talked about this community and their expectations and their requirements for service here in the city. So there are definitely things that police officers respond to that we could not respond to, but that has to be a holistic community conversation, because I guarantee you the minute we stop responding to some of those calls, our citizens who are used to us responding to those calls and want a police officer's attention to some of those issues are going to become vocal. And so the full process here is what we need to build out is identify, hey, police officers, and already going back to Santa Monica is 52% police officers and 48% professional staff. Going back to that, before we start removing police officers from responding to things, I think we should identify those things, what police officers should not be responding to, build the mechanisms and put the processes in place so that those calls will be responded to by someone and then make moves in that direction.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be responded to, but just not by police. Because I mean, I know that's not what you all want to probably do either, is respond to things that seem petty or that could be resolved in other ways.
Agreed. If there's something that can be resolved in a different way, then yes, we want to talk about that.
I can just quickly add, it also goes back to what Rasika was asking. If there's less people, if there's less, if police are not addressing, you know, if they're not always on call, if you will, it opens up opportunity for specific trainings, because it sounds like they're, like you said, they're 24/7. And so if we streamline that process, there's opportunity to embed that training and sort of think outside the box.
Yeah. And once again, as I said, this is not the conversation, it's just the first conversation. There was no way we were going to cover all this territory in one snippet tonight. And there's months of work and conversation that will happen moving forward. And I don't think we're going to lose connection with any of you here.
All right. So Lisa, if I can jump in just to close, I just want to thank everybody for all of your time. I particularly want to thank members of the police department who are obviously well beyond their regular hours for dedicating their time to being with you. I honestly, I think this was not always an easy conversation, but you know, precisely why we want to have this committee and to sit down and talk to each other. I know you need more time to have these conversations and get it right. So I will talk with Lisa and we will make sure that that we are not rushing to conclusions in any way, and that there is sufficient time for engagement on some of these big topics. And I think the other thing I want to say is, you know, it's often said that culture eats training for breakfast. And I want to affirm to you that as you, I think, have seen and know, you have men and women in your police department who are so genuinely dedicated to serving this community and to serving this community with within this community's values and with the excellence that you deserve. And as I have been saying internally, part of our culture, as some of you have mentioned, is that we achieve excellence by being open to change. And so, you know, I just want to express my appreciation for everyone on the call, for being up so late, for doing the hard work, for engaging in the hard questions, and for continuing to work together and to respect each other as members of our community, and particularly to respect the men and women of the police department as members of our community who are working under incredibly challenging circumstances every day and really are dedicated to this work and dedicated to serving this community in a way that I believe is special and deserves recognition. So I want to thank everybody for your time tonight, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.